Council meeting for October 22nd will be called to order. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you for that. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Whitting.
Present.
Councilmember Dorr.
Present.
Councilmember Adler.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor King.
Present.
Councilmember Gilliam.
Present.
Mayor Castema.
Present. So normally at this time I scan the audience and I look for anyone who is of younger age, preferably high school and down, not to at all say that I know what anyone's age is out there, but I'm not sure if we have any high school or grade school students here this evening, so we'll pass on that. Let's go to the first item, the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to number 2, consideration of minutes. 2A is approval of September 10th, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve the September 10th. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to 2B, approval of September 17th, 2024. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve, moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and finally, approval of September 24th, 2024 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we are going to move into citizen comments. We like to put those at the very beginning so that the people who come here to make the public comments are kind of given front and center before we deal with a lot of the business of the city, and it really gives them more time, and everyone's fresh to give them all the attention that the individuals would desire. So with that, I would like to have the clerk read the instructions for testimony, please.
This part of the meeting is for general citizen comments. Please reserve any public hearing testimony to that section of the agenda. The mayor will call on those who have provided their names in advance. Then the mayor will call for other citizens who wish to speak. For the record, please state your name and address or city council district in which you reside. Please direct your comments to the council as a whole, not individual council members. All comments are limited to 3 minutes. The clerk will provide verbal notice when only 30 seconds remain. As a reminder, this portion of the meeting is council's opportunity to hear from the community and not a time to engage in debate. Lastly, per state law, this public comment period cannot be used to speak in support of or in opposition to a ballot measure or individual candidacy, and no such comments will be allowed.
Okay, with that, please go ahead and fill out one of these forms. I think everyone here this evening who wishes to speak has done so. Even if someone does arrive and hasn't filled one out, when I get through with these, I do ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak who hasn't filled out the form, but this certainly places you in queue for when you come up and give your comment. With that in mind, these are just in the order that they were received. Aubrey, is it Reichel? Reichel, please come forward, Aubrey.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Reichel. I live at 1803 West Main here in downtown Puyallup, and I actually also work downtown at Puyallup Mazda. Puyallup Mazda is located at the corner of 7th Street and River Road, and with the prolonged closing of 4th Street going through to River Road, there is increased traffic in that area. And what I have seen from my own observations from working at that corner is there's an increase in vehicle accidents in that area. Most recently, Friday evening, there was one in that same area 2 weeks ago that resulted in bodily harm and injury with multiple vehicles. And if I had to guess, it's at least one a month. So by design of that road, there is one direction going each direction on 7th, and there's a shoulder. Right now, a lot of people are using the shoulder going to River Road to turn right onto River Road, and that's where the accident on Friday happened. in the past as well, while exiting the shopping center that is located across the street. There is only one lane going in, one lane going out on that direction as well. Now, the direction that comes out is one lane. Most cars end up wanting to turn left, end up lining up on the left. And that side also goes straight into 7th. But there's also a shoulder on that side of 7th on the Subaru side. And so what ends up happening is cars then line up on the right side to turn right onto River Road, but then there's also people who want to go straight. And so what ends up happening is people waiting to turn left, and then they get by, and people wanting to go straight in both sides, there ends up being issues there too. So whatever the design is, I would recommend, in my opinion, putting a line down the middle, putting arrows on the street, and just putting a sign up that just says no right on red, because that's another instance that I've seen in the past is people misestimate the speed of which oncoming traffic is coming. They get hit, especially with it being a main thoroughfare for truck drivers. And so just bringing that to attention, because I am kind of tired of seeing accidents in that area. So, thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. We will make sure that this goes to our city manager and to Traffic and Public Works, and then someone will talk with you in more detail about that, okay?
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tyler Litzenberger.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Tyler Litzenberger. I'm president of Vector Development Company, and we are the applicant for the Freeman Logistics Project on the east side of Freeman Road. Mr. Hunger will be presenting a bus stop notch vacation proposal, and I just wanted to come up and introduce myself and let you know that if there's any questions that you would have for us, we're happy. I'm here and I'm happy to answer any questions, but other than that, just wanted to put a face with an application. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate that. Okay, Mitzi McMahon.
Hi there. Thank you. I'm Mitzi McMahon. I'm in District 2. And I first want to thank you, Mayor Castema, for coming out to the neighborhood. I know I've been before you to discuss the Puyallup High School street closure. And I know you've been coming out and making an effort to assess and speak with the community. And you attended the open house that the school had. I sent an email for the record that I just still want to go back to the fact that the public involvement piece and notification has been amiss here. We were not notified properly for the CUP. I've reported that to our city manager, and I also spoke about before issues with the hearing examiner and having due process. I live in an area with a lot of elderly folks, and just getting input, it was difficult at best. There were technical issues that even my neighbor and I had issues with. So all of those things, we'd been calling for the reconsideration of the conditional use permit, and I see that that's not really gotten anywhere, and I know that now the portables won't be installed until January due to permitting. And I think that gives us an opportunity to address some of these elements that have not been addressed. And I just really encourage that the city code is there to uphold, the city code and how the city administers things. And I just was a little surprised at the interpretation that was there. I could be wrong, but it just didn't sit well with me when I have a 22-year-old that's like, well, that's what it's for. And the neighbors don't feel that they got due process. And there's really no ability to make any comments or exact any change because the ship has sailed. And the school, while it says it's amenable to solutions, really, it hasn't really taken much, if anything, that the public has shared at the open houses, which is disappointing. For instance, when I went and spoke to the school district, I talked about the pickup and drop off being associated with a level F street. Can't you put it somewhere else? But I want to skip because I have another topic. So there's that. But I wanted to talk about the no parking ordinance. And I spoke to the city clerk at that open house and had some comments. The first would be to talk to the neighbors because, again, it's an elderly community.
30 seconds.
To let them know that this is potentially coming. And it is potentially a good thing, but I don't feel that I could speak for everyone. My opinion would be no parking at 8th Street Northwest between 2nd and Main. due to the traffic issues and no sidewalks. 4-hour parking on West Main to 7th and 2nd Avenue Northwest, both sides of Main Street. And the perimeter of the streets that bound the portables should be 4-hour parking, not 8-hour parking, because I think that would help with some of the issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could you get those last remarks that you had and put those in writing as to what you would request, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Paul Romich.
Thank you, Paul Romish, District 1. Just took a look at the WashDOT crash portal while I was sitting there. At 7th and River Road, we average about 4 crashes a year at that intersection and actually it's 4 crashes a year with the exception of 2021, which had 1, and we're already at 4 this year. So just a little bit of that. But I'm here to just kind of talk about more comp plan stuff. This council, has some hard decisions to make with budget being the way it is, with our, revenues the way they are, and not seeing the same. I'm not seeing energy appear that really points towards a push towards a more productive land use, right? Some folks are in favor of, commercial nodes, which would enable more small business opportunities, which would enable, greater economic growth and more sales tax dollars to flow into, city coffers, while also offering, more ways for residents to uplift themselves, and realize their dreams as entrepreneurs within the city. I'm not seeing the same. I'm not seeing, any motivation to help bring housing costs down by increasing housing availability. We're at capacity, essentially downtown. There's a few vacant lots, but if the market wanted, if those people were willing to bend to the market of what the housing situation is, they'd build housing. So that's just the way that the owners are. They have the right to not build, but we should also offer people the right to build more if they want to, right? Expanding, what we have downtown in terms of housing portfolios, or even just around the city in general, offers more property tax dollars opportunities, right? The land is going to go up in value when you zone it up, and that's how people can, recoup their costs if they lose money in terms of property value. But the land value will go up still because it's more valuable now to actually develop, right? It's no longer at that capacity or that max potential use, right? You've unlocked it for, greater purposes. So, and then, as you do that, you increase property tax dollars that can flow into the city, right?
30 seconds.
Pushing the limits of what we can actually do in the city will actually will help, increase, the financial stability of the city going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. John, and you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to give it a shot, though.
All right, Mayor.
Chantofalski.
Yep, close enough for my government.
Okay. Well, I have Castama, and I don't know if anyone ever has pronounced that name the first time correct, so I'm used to that too.
John Chantofalski, 1519 7th Street Southwest, Puyallup. First thing I wish to do, if I may, I came upon this article the other day of a United States Marine, retired, he is Navajo. He served as a Navajo code talker. He died recently, I believe it was this past Sunday. In addition, 2 naval aviators were killed in a recent crash east of Mount Rainier. I just wish to reflect upon their life. And if I may, if it's appropriate, provide this to the council.
Certainly. And thank you for doing that. That's very kind of you.
By the way, he was 107. Public safety is one issue. I'm not sure who's responsible, but I think tomorrow I'm going to be talking to my lawyer, only because right behind her office, there's a sidewalk that comes to an abrupt drop that's not ADA. And again, I don't know if that would be the city. Thank God when I first saw it, I stopped in time. There's several others around town. If anyone wants to ride with me on a scooter, you'll get the back pain. Again, on public safety, I spoke earlier this year. As I recall, the deputy chief was here. I gave him a pack of 6 of these lights. Well, I'm on a crusade as I come up. Bright light saves lives. I'm out to get as many people, especially the homeless, lights, because several years ago, 20 or so, my wife and I were out walking, and we darn near
30
got
seconds.
hit. Acknowledge. So that's that. Homelessness. I am not. Over the last 5 years, I thought I might be when I was caring for my wife, first in a nursing home and at home. We survived. I would like to see at New Hope Center, if possible, or if not, why we cannot have a trailer there for
Mr. Mayor,
mobile showers.
Speakers reach
Thank
3
you.
minutes.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate that.
Sorry, I'm going to leave because I'm riding the scooter.
Completely understand. Okay. I don't see anyone else here who would like to speak. So hearing nothing, we're hearing none, no requests. Let's move on to number 3, the consent agenda. And a consent agenda, by the way, is where we have a number of items. Here we have approximately 10 that we vote on at one time with one motion. And there are things that are not controversial. Having said that, though, if there's any item that a council member would like to have removed from this list and placed on the agenda at another point, please indicate at this point. If not, can I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make motion.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, let's move on to number 4, ordinance. First reading. And by the way, for those people who are listening, first reading, a bill such as this or code a modification requires 2 separate votes. First is to move the bill along. Second, and then to prepare amendments in the interim if members so decide to do so. And then on second reading, they can incorporate many of those amendments in there at that time, and that's for final passage. So you go for 2 readings. And the benefit of this is that first reading is where the public gets a view of this, and then there's, a week to 2 weeks where that public feedback can come in and that appropriate amendments can be made before it moves forward. So with that, we're dealing with a ordinance that deals with time parking and additional parking zones in the valley. And with that, City Clerk Dan Vessels, if you would like to proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just provide a brief recap of the history of the pilot program that we've been doing, that we brought to council in the 4th quarter of last year. And then on your screen before you, and in each of your packets, you're also provided this map at a prior meeting. So I've got it here for you today, actually. This is the current by code timed parking limits throughout downtown. And then in your packet, we have the proposed parking time limits through the pilot. Just a brief recap of the program. In the 4th quarter of last year, I came before you as a follow-up to prior parking studies, which were initiated in 2020 to look at the business parking available downtown using the business parking placard program, and subsequently a determination to look at the residential parking passes in the time zones. We implemented a 3-part pilot program. Phase 1 was to purchase new software for the distribution of business parking placards. I can tell you today we have sold approximately 160 of those to date this year, to tremendous success and positive feedback from the business owners. One of the major benefits of that program is they are able to reach out to my office. We have one individual, for example, that's gone on vacation a couple times this year. They wanted to allow one of their employees to use the placard. With a simple email to me, we're able to switch the information for the placard that's got a barcode on it from one vehicle to another vehicle, allowing the employee to park in the business parking zones that we have in downtown while their boss was on vacation. They get back, they send me an email, we flip it back over. In fact, we had 6 more of those placards purchased today by one of our local businesses for this year, so that has been a tremendous success. The second phase of the program was the change to the timed parking that we have in downtown. Again, if you look at your screen before you, this map, and I will attempt to zoom in as best that I can using this because it is a rather large map, you'll see multiple timed zones through here, and it's represented by colors. So here at the top portion of your screen, if you can see the mouse cursor, we have the dark purple, which represents 4 hours. We have a lighter green, which is 2 hours, darker green, which is 3 hours. We have the fuchsia color over here, which on this map represents 8 hours. Orange is 1 hour. About the middle of your screen, if I can get the cursor to move, there we go. We have this blue area that is parking for the police department only. That's around our current public safety building. And then the red are 15-minute zones. So as you can see, this was a significant portion of the downtown core that had these timed parking zones. The history behind this was back in 2011 due to concerns over sound transit ridership, where people were getting on the train and they were parking in residential neighborhoods. The city implemented the 4-hour zones, and as part of that, they had a residential parking pass program. Residents that lived in these areas, per the administrative policy, could apply for and receive 2 stickers for their residents that would allow them to park in these 4-hour zones and not receive a parking citation. In fact, if you drive through any of these neighborhoods, you'll see the 4-hour parking sign, and then just below that, you'll see another little sign that reads, paraphrasing, residential parking passes are exempt from this code. So what we did was a parking analysis using Fay and Pierce to determine what is the available parking that we have currently downtown, and do we still have a need for these 4-hour zones? And while we're addressing that, are the zones up and down Meridian convenient for the businesses, and do they make sense? So what we had proposed was a 3-hour zone. So we removed the 4-hour zones from the map, made some modifications and changes based off of feedback that we heard from businesses along the Meridian core. Some wanted longer hours, some wanted shorter hours. We agreed to a 3-hour time limit because most of the businesses felt that would be adequate for what they wanted. Those 3-hour zones are primarily Meridian from River Road just to 7th up here by the Safeway, and then 1 block east and west on residential zones. In addition, we heard feedback that the community would like to have more 15-minute loading and unloading zones. Following the pandemic, the use of food delivery services and rideshare services picked up dramatically. So in conjunction with Public Works, they identified the safest places along Meridian. We added additional 15-minute parking zones. And then we also expanded the 3-hour zones as well. So along 3rd Avenue behind the library, we had 3-hour over there. As we looked at it using feedback from the community, this parking study, our police department, Public Works, we put the time zones as best they can.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Do you have the updated map? Could we look at that? Because you're referencing.
I don't have that map available to show. It's not very convenient to do a split screen, but that map is part of your packet.
I understand that. I
provided.
just didn't know if you had it so that we could see it on the screen.
I unfortunately don't have that available.
Okay.
But that is in your packet, and what we are looking to do this evening is we're bringing forward an ordinance for first reading, following community outreach and several presentations to council. We're looking for adoption of the proposed pilot as a permanent timed parking zone moving forward.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dan, you perked my attention on the 15-minute parking zones, and there was some indication that there's a few of those set up. Can you tell me how many of those there are so we know what kind of numbers we're talking about taking up spots along Meridian? And I assume they're all along Meridian, or are they on side streets too?
They are primarily at the corner of, they're either on a side street or right on Meridian, right at the corner. There are 11 of those on 11. The proposed map. Yes, sir. And this does not count. On the proposed map, we also do have 15-minute zones directly in front of the current public safety building and near the post office. Not speaking to those. We're just talking about those loading and unloading zones primarily along Meridian or just on the corner of Meridian.
So I support the one in front of the police station and a few others, I think, where there's some residential. I'm very concerned about having, I don't know how many of these are in front of our main strip, like restaurants and stuff, to take up a lot of 15-minute slots. I'm just not quite sure that's a high priority of use. How many of those are actually in front of like restaurants versus the ones in front of the police station? And I know there's a condo loading area here and there, which I support that. How many are actually in front of like restaurants where it's on main drag parking?
That are directly in front of restaurants, I would say, looking at my map, 1, and that's in front of Trackside Pizza. Okay. The majority of these are at the end of the street near the intersection. Okay. Our Public Works and Streets Director said that is the safest place to have these for ingress, egress. None of them are in locations where they removed a parking space from that area.
Oh, good. Okay. I'd like to just see that. I'm okay initially supporting the first reading until I look into that. I know other cities, they've gotten some creative ways for, pickup and drops off with some kind of universal area within a couple block radius where you can kind of go and park there and walk a few steps, and then reserving, kind of primary spots for, customers and others rather than just kind of tying up a lot of space for, Uber Eats or whatever, which I think is great, but I mean, I just don't think, I think they can walk a few steps if there's something kind of somewhat on a side street. So I'd love to see that, and then if there's some concern, maybe I'll bring it up on second reading, but that would be what I'd like to get some more information on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a question I have. So again, Dan, I wish we had it up here. I really do. Because
and Mayor Castema, I am trying to work on getting that
okay,
done.
I just think it's very good that we have a live copy when we're dealing with this. But what we are basically doing is we're going back to the system prior to Sound Transit, generally speaking, where we have time parking in our downtown area, but our neighborhoods have no such time parking other than in select areas where you have high concentration, like around the high school, where you have, a very competitive situation with parking. Other than that, it goes back to where it was before. And with the new parking garage that we have, I don't really know if it's at full capacity yet. There was when COVID went into effect, a lot of people stayed home, and I know people are going back to work, but I don't believe that garage is at full capacity yet. So there's a lot of parking, so then pressure on the neighborhoods that kind of precipitated this idea no longer exists. So that's really why we're making this. It's a much simpler situation. I know that when we went to this in 2011, we have issued hundreds of placards, hundreds of them. And do you have a number?
Mayor Castema, we do not have a number, but I would say that based off my initial review and the history of the program, I would put the number of residential parking stickers that the city's provided more in the thousands, potentially nearing the 10,000 mark.
Okay, that was much more than my hundreds. Okay, so now it's interesting. I think a message that this does send is that, with our downtown core, if you do have a multifamily residence there, is that if you want an absolute guarantee of a parking place, then you in essence have to have responsibility to find that parking spot. that the city doesn't automatically provide that. And I know that doesn't go across well, but actually the latest requirements that are out there, state-of-the-art requirements, say that for every unit you build in your downtown core, and by that I mean close to Sound Transit, where we're putting out multifamily structures, that you're looking at 0.7 parking spots. Now, I will remind colleagues here that's a lot better. The state legislature just came out, and you know what they said? 0 parking within a half mile of Sound Transit. So you can imagine that if this stayed in effect and someone put basically 6 homes where there is now 1, and they would be allowed to do that, 6 structures where there's now 1 and 6 units, and then you multiply that by 2, you'd be giving 12 passes within a half-mile radius or wherever those zones are. So I think this is a good way to go back to where it was before, a more simple method of doing that. But I certainly would like to hear what other members have to say. With that, Councilmember Adler.
Thank you. Dan, could you please remind me about business permits and employee permits, right? We issue those?
Yes.
And can you just describe that for me?
The process, as a quick explanation, we have a online application on our website. A business can go online. They can go in and purchase as many of the placards as they would like. The system allows them to add anywhere from if they wanted to purchase 50 of them at a time, it has an unlimited number. The placards are $60 for the calendar year, and that allows them to park in primarily 2 lots. We have what we traditionally call the AOB lot, which is on the other side of 3rd behind the activity center. And we have a section of that lot that is lined out specifically for those placards. We have the Cornforth Campbell lot as well. And there are 2 sections of that. We have the one that is covered, and only people that have the business parking placards can park in the covered parking. And then for the uncovered parking, you have to park there before 8:30 if you have a placard. After 8:30, it's open to the general public. The placards are good for 1 calendar year, and they have a barcode embedded on them. The barcode contains the basic information of the vehicle: make, model, color, license plate. So the parking enforcement officer can scan that barcode using their city-issued cell phone, and that will tell them what information that placard is supposed to be on a specific car. If it's not, they have the ability to issue a citation for that.
And is that with the implementation of an updated program and software that you had brought forward previous to me being elected to council?
Yes, that is through Civic Plus. We purchased that software last year, and to offset the cost of that purchase, council at the time authorized the placards to go from $20 a year to $60 a year, and to date that is paid for that software application, which we additionally use for all of our special business licenses. I believe the court uses that for other functions as well. We're also starting to use that for our development and permitting services.
Yeah, it's innovative and smart. And I think that the technology is good, and hopefully PPD feels the same way of its ease to use and to verify the vehicle. So if you have a business parking permit, I just want to be sure that I understand correctly. If I have one of those permits, I can park in the AOB lot or the Cornforth Campbell lots only, exclusively, or no?
Those are the 2 primary lots at this time, yes.
Okay. And if I have one of those permits, is there a time limit on how long I can park in those lots?
Not under the current code or the administrative policy, no.
And is that proposed in this pilot project, changing
No.
or implementing time limits on
No.
business parking permits?
We are not modifying that with this proposed ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Councilmember Dorr. Oh, please.
I just want to let council know what you have before you, and I do apologize for the delay, and I can zoom if you like. This is the proposed map.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. I know, didn't want to make you sweat there, but I appreciate you doing it. Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you. Dan, I just have a question on the 15-minute zones. From my understanding from last year is that those are not those were requested by the businesses. They need to be able to load and unload their supply, get their shipments in, get their supplies, their food deliveries, whatever it is. So for them to have the products necessary to do business, is that, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, so it was a two-part request. One part was to provide additional loading and unloading zones to make it easier. The businesses also said, we would appreciate more spaces where drivers can easily get in, pick up food, and get out. It allows them to get the businesses done. It allows more orders to come through as well. So it's a twofold benefit.
Okay, good. I just remember hearing about businesses having concerns that they couldn't get their stuff. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any further questions, comments? Councilmember Adler.
Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thinking about the business permits, employee permits, when a time comes where the Cornforth Campbell lots and the AOB lot is no longer accessible for individuals that have a business employee permit, will that code come back to be amended? Because then we will have a bunch of folks with that permit that no longer, those permits are useless. Is that correct?
In the event in the future that we cross that bridge, then I will be working with Development and Permitting Services as well as council to bring forward something to address that concern that fits the needs of the community as best we can.
And I again just want to make sure that I'm following correctly. The business employee permits can only be used in these two lots. I cannot, if I have the business employee permit, I cannot go park on the street for unlimited hours.
That's correct. It's specifically for the city-owned parking lots.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me get the general consensus of my colleagues here. I have a couple amendments for this, but if we would like just to go to first reading and then save all the amendments, that might be a preferable route to go. I've got two, but I suspect we're going to have more. And with that, if anyone would like to just move for first reading passage, we'll just do that, and then we'll queue up for amendments when we come back. And by the way, when would that be? When would you have it queued up?
I could bring this back potentially as early as next week for second reading. It depends on the amendments that council requested.
Okay. I'll kind of get the consensus here. Councilmember Adler, please.
I am rusty on my parliamentary procedure, but Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say that I would be interested in hearing the amendments that you have. Thanks.
Oh, certainly. Well, thank you for asking. Actually, in this schematic that you see in front of you, I think that what I had done is around the Cornforth property was actually blue, and around the Hill Funeral Home, is that, what do you call that? Purple or?
It's a fuchsia color.
Fuchsia, okay, I apologize. Or magenta, okay, I've got competing colors here going on. I like magenta, I'll go with that. But anyway, that's magenta in the proposal that you have. Yes. On your map, you have my amendment reflected.
Yes, sir.
And so, Councilmember Adler, what I was going to do is amend it to reflect what you see on that map right there around the Cornforth and around the Hill Funeral Home. I thought it was a pretty easy, in fact, I thought it was a good catch that we make sure that those are 3-hour and not permitted, because as we put developments there, we don't want those developments now to all of a sudden be issuing two placards per unit. So it was just a catch on my part. So that was one of them. The second one was, if you could go, Dan, down a bit, around, if you see that black mark in there, is that I have requests that we eliminate the 3-hour parking where you see that black mark and just go with straight unlimited parking with no permits. So that's a request that I received. And that seems like a pretty reasonable request. In fact, I thought we had actually been there originally. So those are the only two amendments I have thus far. And if you would like me to entertain those now, I gladly will. Or I can save them. Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm open to supporting your amendment. I just want a little more clarity so I can understand the Cornforth Campbell, because that's kind of a highly sensitive area that we're looking at developing. So can you please walk that through me again to understand what your proposal, what it is now, and then what you're proposing?
Yes.
And what that change would look like? I really want to drill down on that.
Well, actually, as you see the map right now, that is exactly what my amendment does for the Cornforth and for the Hill Funeral Home block, both of those. I'm not sure how that was done, Dan. I know it was done in error. Because right now they're magenta, and my amendment, because I think it makes sense, is to go to 3-hour parking exactly as you see it there. And then the other amendment is down as you can.
Yeah, I got that one, but just forget the colors. What is the first reading hour limit versus what you're amending? Is it going from 4 to 3?
What it is right now is 4 hours,
Okay.
and then it would allow people a placard. And I don't think any of us think that would be appropriate as you develop that multifamily areas to have. You would have, in essence, 300 placards
Right.
coming out of that complex. I saw that. I think it was an oversight on the part, and I thought it would be a good correcting amendment to make. So those are the only things.
So it would, again, just so I'm getting this clear, I understand. I think right now it's currently at 4
Yes.
and a placard.
Yes.
Now it would be no placard in 3.
Correct.
Okay, I would support that. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, if you'd like, I'll make the motion, since we're on that train. I would like to put forward a motion that we, in essence, affect the changes on that Cornforth and then that adjacent property there with the Hill Funeral Home block. And I actually have a more technical way of stating that, but that would be one amendment. And so I will put that one out. And Councilmember Johnson, you said you might second that?
I second that, yeah.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Okay, and so let's go ahead and discuss that. Councilmember Adler.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor, I will speak to your second amendment.
Okay, so any discussion on the First Amendment? Okay, with that, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, passes. Now I'll go to the Second Amendment, Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Adler, and that is the one where you see this map that has the blackened out, and that would remove it on 2nd and 5th, your 3-hour parking, and it would go to just basically what all the other neighborhoods have. And that was a request that was made. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you. A question. So there would be no, could you kindly repeat the amendment?
There would be no, all that would be is you have 3-hour parking on 4th, which would be on the north side of where that black mark is there, north side there, right against the pavilion. Both sides of that street would be 3 hours. Meridian, you'd have a 3-hour plus a 15-minute load. But other than that, 5th would have no demarcations whatsoever. Neither would 2nd.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Mayor, would you be open to a friendly amendment on your amendment?
Certainly. Let's hear what would it do.
I would like to request on Pioneer and 2nd Street on the east side of the activity center, where currently there are approximately 4 or 5 stalls. They are not highlighted on the map that is presented on the monitor at current. But if you are open to a friendly amendment, I would like to include 2nd Street at Pioneer as part of what you are proposing on Amendment 2.
Yes.
And Mayor Casper, if
Dan,
I can just
please.
speak to that. Councilmember Adler, the reason why that section is not included on this, we are not proposing any changes. This is just a timed street parking. Those are lined out in code as specifically parking stalls. So the timed parking that is already existing for those would not change. We can make a change to that if you'd like. I just wanted to let you know that's why that section is not there.
What is it currently?
If my memory is correct, and Councilmember Adler, you can let me know if I'm wrong, the 2 northernmost stalls are 15-minute spaces. The other 4 stalls are 2-hour parking near the splash pad.
I believe you're correct.
So the proposal as written doesn't change that, and that would stand.
Right. We were not going to be changing any of the parking stalls in that location. We were just looking for time to on-street parking.
Councilmember Adler, your thoughts?
My friendly amendment stands.
Okay, and your friendly amendment is to do what?
I would like to propose that those stalls reflect similarly to what is being proposed on between Second and Meridian on 5th.
Okay, so you would like 3 hours in all of those?
That's not correct. What I'm proposing,
Oh.
if I understand what is your motion, Mr. Mayor, is that the highlighted black area is there are no constraints. Is
That's
that
right,
correct?
there's no constraints.
Okay.
So
Which I am in support of. My friendly amendment is just to expand that or implement similar to Second and Pioneer. That's
So with
correct.
no constraints. Councilmember Adler, I'm afraid that I guess I would have to see the situation, and the amendment, let me just say logistically, the amendment that I'm dealing with is in that area, and I think this is a separate issue that I guess I feel like I'm not familiar with that area enough to where I would call it necessarily a friendly amendment, because I'm just not that familiar with it. No offense.
So it goes.
We can put it up as an amendment, though. I don't know enough about it to say that it would be friendly. Councilmember Whitting.
I was just curious on this amendment, what the current parking timing is on that Fifth Avenue.
It is a 4-hour zone, am I correct, Dan? It's 4-hour magenta with permits.
That is correct. And Mr. Mayor, I did have Nathan and IT help me out. We have the original map as it's shown in your packet, so it doesn't have any of the amendments in it, if that makes it.
Correct. So that is currently, Councilmember Whitting, all magenta, that neighborhood, that entire neighborhood is.
Okay. I'm kind of where you are on Councilmember Adler's amendment. I need to study this a little bit more, so I'm not prepared to vote on it at this time.
Okay. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as clarification, to Councilmember Adler's friendly amendment, 2nd Street and Pioneer, you were referring to the parking stalls there next to Pioneer Park condominiums and Anthem Coffee?
That's correct.
Are those part of that complex, or is that city-owned parking stalls?
I believe that those are city-owned stalls, but I can't confirm that. I would have to check with Development Permitting Services.
Thank you.
Okay, there's amendment. Councilmember Gilliam.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry, thank you, Mayor, sorry. Just following up with, I just want my voice to be heard on my personal preference for those 5 stalls. If at all possible, I would love for the 2 15-minute stalls to start at 6 a.m. Because people park there overnight and then you can't get them out, and people do shop at Anthem starting at 6 a.m. And we need to funnel people through faster and not have bogged down parking in that area. So my preference, if we're talking those stalls, the 2 15-minute ones start at 6 a.m. and go to 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilliam. I would say at this point, let's deal with the amendment we have over on 5th, and then we can, if there's another amendment proposed that deals with those stalls, we'll address it at that time. So is there any further discussion on the other location, which is on 5th and 2nd? Hearing none. Oh, Councilmember Dorr.
I am going to agree with Councilmember Whitting. I'm not opposed to it, but I need to see it, so I'm not prepared to vote on it today. Thanks.
If I'm correct, was Councilmember Whitting referring to the parking stalls or this amendment?
I was referring to the Fifth Avenue
Okay.
timed.
Okay. With that, all those in favor of this modification on Fifth and Second, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Okay. Okay. The chair or the mayor is in doubt, and just so that we make sure, I want to make sure that everyone is heard. Will we have clerk please give roll call?
Mr. Mayor, before you do so, Mr. Mayor, I just want, so I guess the friendly amendment kind of threw me in unfriendly understanding. So I just want, did we just vote on your initial amendment?
That's it.
So we did not vote on Councilmember Edler's?
That's correct.
Okay, so thank you. I just
Okay.
want to make sure that we were confused. Thank you. Or I wasn't confused.
Okay. Please proceed with the roll call.
Councilmember Gilliam.
Aye.
Councilmember Whitting.
Nay.
Councilmember Dorr.
Nay.
Councilmember Johnson.
This is for Mayor Castama's amendment?
Correct.
Aye.
Councilmember Adler.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor King.
Aye.
Mayor Castama.
Aye. Okay, that
Passes
passes.
5-2.
So, Councilmember Adler, would you like to bring forward that as a formal amendment at this point, or what's your thoughts?
Thank you. I will refrain at this time from bringing forward an amendment. I would appreciate staff looking into the stalls at Second and Pioneer and understanding, for my edification, understanding better who owns those stalls, history of the stalls, history of the timing on those stalls, the timing regulation on those stalls, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And if possible, Dan, whatever Councilmember Adler wishes to see, write it up as an amendment so that it can be proposed formally, so that there's a lot of clarity to that. Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, I'd like some more study on that. I kind of, now I understand you're talking about that kind of circle, that little circle right in front of the splash park, right? Yeah, I think we need to study that a little bit because I'm concerned that if we open it up for long-term parking all day, whatever, anybody, that's such a high traffic area where you got people using the Anthem, the senior center, the spray park, the library, overflow, even though it's not many people do that. So it might clog that up, and to have a little bit of limited parking there can kind of keep that fresh and refreshed. But I'm not opposed to it. I just think we need to kind of study that a little bit more. I don't want to overstudy it, but I understand, I'm concerned that if we open that up, it could be an extension of resident parking there, and I'm concerned about that. So permanent resident parking for those that might live there, and we need to consider that in mind if we decide to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to encourage our city clerk and city staff, and probably legal on top of that, to investigate those parking stalls because there are some conflicting stories and some maybe misunderstandings of who actually owns those stalls, who owns the right-of-way of that street, who is in charge of maintaining that roundabout and that whole area. And I am not sure if we ever got that resolved when that building was completed. So just to have a full clarity before moving forward on that area, just to get everybody on the same page, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitting.
Yes, I would like clarity as well, so I will just second what Deputy Mayor King mentioned. And we've had several amendments tonight that I hadn't had a chance to consider in advance of the meeting, and hopefully we won't have that same thing occur next week. It'd be nice to have if anybody comes up with some further amendments to get them in soon enough so that we can get them into our packets and understand what the implications are on some of these that we may not be intimately familiar with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitting. However, before we proceed further, we have not formally put this before the council with a second. So I would like to entertain a motion by someone here that we put this ordinance first reading before the council. Can I please get someone to do that?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. And I'm going to then at that point imply that the amendment, of course, was for this. But now open discussion for the final passage of first reading. I think we've discussed this thoroughly, and Councilmember Whitting, we will try to get any amendments out as soon as possible. So thank you. So all those in favor indicate by saying aye for first reading.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes. Let's move on to Resolution 5A, and that is a resolution to set a public hearing for petition to vacate a portion of 22nd Avenue Northwest. City Engineer Hans Hunger, I believe, is the person coming forward.
I'm here remotely.
Oh, there you are. Oh, okay.
All right.
That's fine.
Still healing up from a broken ankle, so I appreciate you allowing me to do this remotely.
Well, get well.
Thank you. So City Engineer Hans Hunger, tonight we have before you, there's a petition to vacate a portion of 22nd Avenue Northwest, which is out near Freeman Road area. And in order to vacate a road, we have to put a resolution before the council to set a public hearing. So that's what's being done tonight, not the actual discussion on the vacation. We are proposing to set the public hearing for November 26th. By passing this resolution, we'll post at 3 locations the notice of this public hearing, including at the site that the vacation's occurring out on 22nd Avenue Northwest. And the one thing I did want to note in the resolution, there is a clerical error, although the title is correct, 22nd Avenue, and in the whereases it describes 22nd Avenue Northwest. In section 1, it mistakenly describes it as 3rd Avenue Northwest. That is 22nd Avenue Northwest. So that's just something we'll clarify there, but we'll get this posted and then set the public hearing for November 26th for this vacation. And Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you. I'm open to if there's any questions.
Okay, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that I think, Hans, you clarified that. So we're not necessarily authorizing or giving permission for this to officially happen. We're just really, in a sense, authorizing to send this to a public due process for this to be studied and have public input, and then bring back those findings for council for possible adoption or denial. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So with that in mind, I would support this public process to take it before the public and propose why this is important and why it's a public benefit, and let that process go forward. So if it needs a motion, I'd be happy to set that motion as stated here.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now formally open for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, the motion to approve resolution passes. So let's move on to considerations and requests. We have 6A, which is ARPA. Barbara is going to be addressing the ARPA spending update, and these were the funds that we received during the COVID crisis, and that helped local jurisdictions and larger jurisdictions out with budget shortfalls, et cetera. So with that, Finance Director Barbara Lopez, can you give us your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Castema. Good evening, Council. Barbara Lopez, Finance Director. So tonight I wanted to give you an update on what ARPA monies we have spent. It's the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Plus, I also want to talk to you about our requirement to have these funds fully obligated by the end of the year. So looking for some feedback on some funds that aren't obligated just yet, and I'll talk about what that means. So just a high-level recap of what the remaining ARPA funds are. You may recall that the city received an allocation of $11.8 million. Of that, so far, we've spent or have contracts out for just over $10 million of that, which leaves $1,625,879 that is, quote, unobligated at the end of the year. Unobligated means that we don't have a purchase order issued or a signed contract. Those are a couple of the mechanisms that the Treasury Department has said will indicate that funds are obligated. Yes. So I'm looking to you tonight to get some feedback on where we should obligate those monies at. So the monies that are left are a result of a couple of different things. Under community health and assistance, we've got the hotel pilot project. During the 23-24 budget, we set aside some monies for that out of our ARPA monies. We have gotten more grants from Pierce County Human Services that have covered more of those costs than what were originally anticipated. So therefore, we're anticipating about $394,000 of that being left by the end of the year. It may be a little bit more than that. We're estimating what the costs are going to be through the rest of the year and what the grant will pay. So there might be a smidge more left than just that. Under infrastructure, there are a couple of different projects where money have been allocated to them where it won't be fully spent in a specific project. One of those is Manorwood Phase 2. There's about $668,000 left available there. That project is complete. So they're done with that particular work, and so those monies are eligible to be put towards something else. The other project is the Fruitland Sewer Extension. There's about $512,000 available there. We are currently using some of the ARPA funds for design work, but that design work won't be complete, so construction won't be able to be obligated by the end of the year. So those monies are available there. And then there's a small amount, $51,000, that just hasn't been allocated to anything yet. So we've got just over $1.6 million that we want to have obligated by the end of the year. If we do not have it obligated at the end of the year, we need to return the money to the Treasury, to U.S. Treasury. So an option for allocating those particular funds is to the 4th Street Storm Extension project. We're already paying for we've already allocated a good portion of ARPA monies to that, but it's a straightforward option in that there's a current construction contract that's large enough to fully obligate those remaining ARPA monies. It is an important project for downtown redevelopment. It would free up some of those monies to go towards the storm utility monies to go to other projects, such as perhaps the next phase of the 4th Street Storm Extension. And infrastructure projects like this are one of the carve-out categories from ARPA that they're, sorry, I'm losing my words this evening. It's one of their main categories for spending. So that is our one recommendation for that. You did receive an email that it is possible to spend $1.3 million of it instead on the design contract for the public safety building. We can make that work within ARPA money, so that is another option as well.
Excuse me, Councilmember Johnson, would you like to ask a question now?
I think I'll wait to the end, at the end of the presentation, then I'll queue up for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Proceed.
Thank you. My last slide is I just want to talk a little bit about interest earned. We had $11.8 million of this money on hand. We invested that. So far through September, we've accrued $815,000 for that in interest. The good thing about that is on ARPA monies, it is not required to be remitted to the U.S. Treasury. For most federal monies, if you earn over $500 in interest income, you get to give the rest of it to the U.S. Treasury. That is not the case here. And it is additionally not subject to ARPA program restrictions. We do not have to spend it according to the dictates of the remaining ARPA monies. So in essence, it can be treated as Tier 3 monies. So it could also be allocated to the 4th Street storm extension. It could be transferred to budget stability reserves, Tier 3, for future allocation or any other use council wanted to come up with.
Excuse me, just for clarification.
Yes.
So the $815,000 is not part of the 1.6?
Correct. That is over and above. That 1.6, we don't have to have that obligated by the end of the year. We don't have to spend it according to ARPA guidelines. It is simply money that we can use as we would any Tier 3. We will continue to earn money, a little bit more interest as we're still spending down, so that's not the final amount, but that is what we've earned to date. It's a significant amount of money, and so I felt like I needed to call that out to you.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, so just some clarity. If you want to put some of that slide back there, I want to take a look at that. So
this one, the interest earned?
No, the one prior to that. So
this one?
Yeah. So the 1.6 million unobligated, we need to obligate. I'm happy to help us get there so we can obligate it. Let's see. So is there staff recommendation initial? I mean, we have these choices here, and including the, sounds like a new choice option that was inserted for the public safety building. But is staff recommending the 4th Street as kind of a, let's call it a priority need or a good fit? Can you give me some ideas how that came about and versus some of the other ones?
So the 4th Street storm extension is a very large project with a lot of phases.
Okay.
So there is significant cost involved there. Infrastructure investments like this are one of the primary spending categories under ARPA. So these are the types of projects that they want folks to work on, where drinking water and good solid storm and sewer infrastructure. So this type of project is specifically called out in ARPA. Again, we have a current construction contract that's large enough to obligate the remaining ARPA monies, and it is an important project for downtown redevelopment.
Okay.
So for those reasons, yes, staff was recommending to put the monies towards that.
So if I understand it correctly, 1.625 remains unobligated, but are you recommending, according to this graph, that is under now the obligated column? Is that what you're saying? We're going to disperse it in that breakup? Help me bring some clarity into that.
The only thing that I was attempting to show with this particular graph in here is the orange highlighted program that is the project that we were recommending to put those monies towards.
So you're recommending the full 1.625 going to the 4th Street extension 100%?
That is staff recommendation.
Not divided up like the obligated. Yes. Okay, all right. Here's my thoughts. I like the idea of the public safety building. I think it's honorable and doable. And however, I think it's pretty well funded and accounted for through options that we've already taken as a council. And so I feel like it could be used, but this could be better used for our infrastructure. I guess I kind of feel like I'm hearing one of my former colleagues who's not here anymore, Councilmember Ferris. She loved putting money in infrastructure. She used to always, get upset that there was never enough money for that. And so I feel like I have an obligation to carry that torch for her and say, I'd like to suggest a staff's recommendation that the $1.6 million and some change be fully implemented into the 4th Street storm extension. I'd like the $115,000 to go strictly to Tier 3 as a one-time usage. I feel like with the infrastructure, putting the 1.6 in there is a good chunk of change. Let's put that 815 into a tier 3. That could be a one-time use as the council sees need for that, or whatever we need. If we need it for budget stability later, we can always pull from that tier 3 money. So that'd be my recommendation: 1.6 to the 4th Street and the 115,000 to the tier 3. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitting, but before I go on, let me just ask Barbara something. What are you looking for this evening from us?
I'm looking for some direction as far as where to obligate these monies at.
Okay, you would not, are you looking for a motion, or you're just looking for a general consensus?
A motion would be fabulous.
Okay. Councilmember Whitting.
Yeah, I just had the question. Once we allocate this money, it has to be obligated, so there's no going back potentially. So my question is there the opportunity to find other funds to support that stormwater extension? We've got some available funds, and if we commit it there, then we preempt the ability to pull funds in from other grants and then use the money on something else. So I wouldn't want to preempt the ability to get grant funding from another source for that project.
So I'm going to quickly get over my head in how big the 4th Street Storm Extension project is. So I may end up needing Ken Davies to come up and help with that. It is storm monies and other grants and things like that that's currently paying for that project. If this money doesn't go towards it, we would continue down that path of trying to secure additional grants and storm monies. But what impact that has on anything else, I would definitely need Ken to talk about.
Go ahead, Ken.
So the next 2 phases, so N1, 2B, and then I'll probably mess up the next phase, but N1, 2C, those ones amount to about $6 million on that phase. And then phase N2, and I believe Hans is on if I get this incorrect, but then phase N2 is $9 million. So and that's just getting you basically to the railroad tracks and underneath for N1B and N1C. And then N2 is going from the railroad tracks, and I believe it's to Pioneer. So I don't know if Hans is still on. He might be able to correct.
Yes, I am. Yeah, so we're currently in design for the next 2 phases to get us all the way to the railroad tracks, underneath the railroad tracks, and even the 3rd phase, it gets us to 4th Avenue. And you're correct on that $6 million estimate for that there. So we've got plenty of project left to take these funds. And I think really the decision factor here, in my opinion, is how fast do we want to implement these next phases to get the downtown connected with stormwater. The more money we can put into it, the faster we can get it there. If we wait for grants to get it, which we are actively pursuing additional grants for this, then you're kind of dependent on when we can secure those grants.
I think Councilmember Whitting was asking the question, though, of that, let's hypothetically, of the $6 million, how much of that will be coming from grants as opposed to coming from general fund expenditures?
Currently, we've secured 2 legislative asks worth about $1.1 million for that phase, and the rest would be out of stormwater funds right now.
Correct. Okay. Councilmember Whitting, do you want to follow up?
I think my question has been answered, but I'm still struggling with the question of do we want to take money that we have in our hand and apply it to a project that could be funded from grants as opposed to putting it into something else like the public safety building where there's no grants available. So that's what I'm struggling with at the moment.
So with that, did you understand my question, though? Hans, you said that maybe you could get potentially $1 point something million. You're going for a grant but can you address his concern? Is that a valid concern?
Well, I do think it is. You know, you've got to kind of line up your projects, including the public safety building, with where you think I could potentially get grants for this project. And we have secured flood control zone district grants for the 4th Street. We've secured now our 3rd legislative request for funding on the 4th Street project versus, well, if I don't have any, you know, really even on the horizon, any potential grants for the public safety building, there is some wisdom there to say, let's put this towards the public safety building and hope that we can secure some grants for the 4th Street, which isn't unrealistic, but it will probably just take longer to complete that project with that decision.
Okay, Councilmember Johnson, do you mind if I go to Deputy Mayor King first?
Go ahead. I was just going. Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I understand is to finish the 4th Street stormwater project, there is 1.1 that's needed for that, or is it the 6 million? 6 million.
6 million.
The next 2 phases are 6 million. And we're only going to be able to get 1.1 through our grant. So even if we take the 1.6 and the 1.1, we're still a little shy of a little over $3 million still needed to complete the project. So what I look at is the importance of being able to finish this extension to be able to have the stormwater capacity for our downtown projects that we are looking to do. And those are just right down the pipeline, no pun intended. And if we reallocate those funds to public safety, which I fully understand, we're only saving approximately about $85,000 a year over the next 30 years. Is that correct? About?
That's correct.
Roughly? And so I look at it big picture of if we are able to complete this infrastructure project and be able to implement a lot of these projects that we are wanting to bring to downtown, the tax revenue that's going to be generated based off of those projects is going to far exceed the $85,000 that we're going to save on the public safety building, which it kind of tips the scale, in my opinion, to allocate not only the request that we are asking from the legislature, but with grants, but also apply the 1.6 that we have sitting here as well. So I'm not sure if pushing it towards the public safety building would be in our favor at this point. But I'm willing to listen.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up. I'd like to make a motion, since Barbara's looking for a motion, at least get this, down the pike a little further. And if it's adopted, great. If not, we can deny it. But I'd like to make a motion that we put the $1.6 million and obligate that to the 4th Street storm extension. And in that motion, I'd like to take the $815,000 and direct that to Tier 3 for council usage as needed down the road. That's my motion.
Okay, it's been moved. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. So that's the motion we are discussing. Councilmember Whitting.
We've talked about the public safety building, but there's probably an infinite number of projects that we could apply this to that are in the pipeline. We've got a big capital projects list. I'm just wondering, again, I don't want to forego the opportunity to get additional grant funding. I'd always like to go to the grant funding first and then the available funds we have, as opposed to applying our available funds and then not doing the grant requests. So, I hear the concerns about putting it in the public safety building, but I was just using that as a placeholder. Are there any other projects that we could apply this to that we don't think grant funding would be forthcoming for, that we might be able to get going quickly?
I would need to defer to Ken or Hans on that, and it would need to be a contract issue before the end of the year.
I understand the time frame. Is there anything you can think of, Hans?
No, I think as far as projects that we already have or we're going to have a contract with by the end of the year, I think we're really limited on the 4th Street storm extension. And keep in mind, we're just talking utility type projects, not necessarily street projects that this could go to.
Okay. Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you. So when I posed the question about the public safety building, it was because we got one option. And I think that the council should have that list. I wanted to see what else it could be. We just got told one thing and didn't get presented. We got staff's priority, but not the council's priority. And so the reason I threw public safety building out there, just kind of like what Councilmember Whitting is saying, we had a big discussion during the budget about grants and how important it is that we're out there trying to get those. And this feels like another opportunity where we're giving that up on this project. And I'm confused. Can someone help me on the 1.1? Because with all these phases, I wish we had the phases. I wish we had something in front of us to look at instead of just a dollar amount. The 1.1, is that allocated to the current phase that is going to be done, or is that 1.1 moving on to the next phase? I'm confused at where that money went, or what you're saying with that money.
Okay, maybe I can try to add some clarity to that. The 1.1 in both of those legislative asks was worded to go to phase 2. Right now, we're in discussions with Department of Commerce, and we have to put an amendment into the legislative ask to actually have it go to phase N1B. So it's not the current phase that's under construction, but our intention is to use it to the next phase to get us to the north side of the railroad tracks. But we have to get that amendment through the Department of Commerce first.
So is the 1.6 going to that same phase that you're asking? Which phase, or what is the 1. I need those numbers again. Phase, what did you just say, Hans? The request you're going to ask for Commerce is to what? Is
to change that 1.1 from phase 2 to the phase N1B. I'm sorry it's confusing, but we've had to split this project into smaller and smaller bites to get it done. And so we're dealing with some semantics. We asked for phase 2, which, in theory, that would have been the next phase. But because we bid it off into smaller chunks, we're asking, can we reuse it for what will be our next phase, but that's N1B.
Okay, and so then the 1.6 that staff is proposing, is that for phase N1B?
Yes, it is.
That, you guys lost me on that one.
And I would want to add some clarity to it. We've talked about the next phases to get us, past the Sound Transit Garage, under the BNSF tracks, all the way to 4th Avenue. There is still a future phase to then start heading east towards downtown and capture more of the downtown. So, I apologize. I was just searching real fast to see if I could pull up a phasing map and stuff, and I will provide one that the clerk can distribute to you. But we've got lots of phases still to go to fully integrate this direct discharge into the downtown area.
Okay, thank you.
City Manager Kirkley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to clarify, Hans, I think you meant to say that the 1.6 would be going to the current phase that we're about to complete.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did, yes.
Which would then free up money, that 1.6 that is currently being used for the phase that is being constructed right now on 4th Street. 1.6 from that budget right now would then go to the future phase, which is the next one that goes from 7th to the railroad tracks. So current construction is basically River Road to 7th Avenue. That's fully funded. if council takes the 1.6 that Barbara is recommending, that 1.6 would go to this current construction and would free that up, that 1.6, for this next phase, which is from 7th to the tracks. And we have to obligate that this year, so that's why we brought it forward, because that is a current contract. And if you do want to see a map, I do in my PowerPoint, which Nathan can put up, if you'd like to see a phase map, I do have that in my PowerPoint for the next presentation, if you needed to see that.
Okay, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hans, should council pass the adoption of the 1.6 million going to the 4th Street and the 8.15 into Tier 3 in this scenario, that would get us, as city manager stated, up to roughly the railroad tracks. So, but from that point to the end result of completing this, again, just recap the approximate number you anticipate to finish that and tie that up. What's a dollar amount you anticipate completing that once we get to the railroad tracks?
Councilmember Johnson, I will say I'm comfortable giving the $6 million up to 4th Street, and then as I start to move east, I need to look again to see what our current estimates for that other phase is. The reason why I'm confident in what to get to 4th Street is because we've already under design on that, so I have some preliminary information.
But would it be safe to, at least just for rough council, we talk about a total of 10 million to finish this thing out. You got 6 to get to the 1 and then another 4. I mean, where are we at for total estimated cost to button this up?
Up against a wall, I'll say it's probably closer to 12 to 13 million.
So that's all. So I guess I want to comfort Councilor Whitting a little bit. I see his point. If we were designating these funds to kind of cap off something that could have been eligible for grant money and we just kind of paid it off and really didn't give the grant opportunity a chance to fund it, then I would probably really see that. But the reality is that if we move this 1.6 into this, there's still another roughly 12 million that we can apply for a grant. So there's plenty of ask. This is not going to take up that ask and close that gap so tight that we've cut ourselves off. So I'm very comfortable moving this into that. And I would say adoption would be good. I think there's always other options of what we could spend it on, but part of our role as council is to use our best judgment, find a consensus. But I think I feel pretty good about what staff is proposing, and it seems to make sense. Could we put it somewhere else? We certainly could, and certainly if the council decides to do that, I would support the majority. But it seems to make sense for economic development, for getting this thing up to the railroad tracks, and then continue to apply for grants for this remainder 12 million is certainly able to do. And it seems like the public safety building, although it could be used, I think we've got a plan that we've adopted, and it was a unanimous decision to fund it. And so I think we just let that system kind of go and then put this money back into the infrastructure. And I know that in honor of Councilmember Ferris, she would be pleased at this scenario. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. I'm not sure Councilmember Ferris would like us to name anything to do with this project after her, but the Ferris, I don't know what you would do. Anyway, with that, do I hear any further discussion? If there is no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion presented by Councilmember Johnson indicate by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes. So let's move on to other business. I see that 2 of our favorite people are here in the audience. We have our lobbyists from Olympia. Actually, before we get to them, I'm going to be hearing from our other favorite person, Joe Peck, our attorney.
First, with the city attorney being a favorite person in the city.
And by the way, just so that people know, this is dealing with proposed public defense caseload standards and potential impacts to the city of Puyallup. And I'll let our city attorney explain this, but this could have significant impacts on the city when it comes to fighting crime. And it can't be understated how important this is to the general public safety out there and to all of our jobs here and our ability to do those and offer public safety, which we prioritize in this community. and have been very proud of. Anyway, proceed, Joe, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here along with Deputy City Attorney Sean Arthur to present regarding public defense caseload standards that have been recently adopted by the Washington State Bar Association. And I'm going to talk to you about the impacts that these caseload standards would have on the city, and also to present a comment letter that Deputy City Attorney Arthur primarily drafted to present to the state Supreme Court on this issue. So we will be asking for your approval at the end of this presentation for that comment letter and for some additional comment. So since 1963, it has been it's been clear that indigent defendants in criminal prosecution are entitled to public defense at the city's expense. Additionally, there's a state law requirement, RCW 10-101-030, that requires cities and counties to adopt standards for the delivery of public defense. And important for us is that RCW requires that the standards that are endorsed by the Washington State Bar Association related to public defense are the standards that we are required to use as a city as guidelines in adopting our own standards. So we're required to adopt standards. We're required to look to the WSBA standards as the blueprint for that. So additionally, this matters and is important to us because for liability reasons. Fairly recently, in 2013, the case of Wilbur versus City of Mount Vernon was decided, and in that case, 2 or 3, I think it was 3 cities were sued by a group of indigent defendants. They were assisted by the ACLU, I believe, and they claimed that they received ineffective assistance of counsel, which is a constitutional violation. The case was removed to federal court. The federal judge found that, in fact, the system that they had in place in these cities did deprive indigent defendants of their constitutional rights, and the judge also found that this deprivation was caused by deliberate choices of city officials. And if you read the opinion, it's pretty scathing. He didn't think much of the defense that was being allotted to these people. And he found that there was a violation of Section 1983, which opened the cities up to over $2 million worth of attorney's fees alone. They received an injunction that required them to report for 3 years. They had to hire a case manager to manage their public defense cases. It was very expensive, and under Section 1983, you can also be required to pay compensatory damages. I'm not certain that they had to pay those in this case, but I do know for a fact that they paid over $2 million in attorney's fees. So there's the liability that's related to standards and not meeting standards. Then in 2015, partially at least in response to this case, new case standards were adopted. And those standards set case limits for individual attorneys per year at 400 maximum cases that a public defender could handle. The city of Puyallup responded at that time by contracting with additional public defenders. I've been told, I wasn't here in 2015, but I've been told anecdotally that there were changes to our case charging standards to try to address these issues. And so at this point, the city contracts with 3 public defense firms. And we essentially have 3 public defenders. Each of these firms allocates 1 public defender. There are times when these caseloads, years where the caseloads can rise up a bit, and because we contract with firms, they have some additional capacity that they can soak up some extra cases if that becomes necessary. But essentially, we have 3 public defenders. That costs the city about, on average, $500,000 a year. So in March of this year, the Washington State Bar Association adopted new case standards for public defense. This was at the request of the Washington State Bar, the Supreme Court asked the WSBA to look into this issue. And so they did, and they adopted these new standards. And they've asked the Supreme Court to adopt these standards as court rules, and we're in that process right now. The standards begin with a caseload cap that is reduced. These WSBA standards will go into effect starting July of next year. They will culminate in July of 2027 at 120 case credits per attorney per year if they go into effect. And again, WSBA has already adopted them. We already have a statute that says these are going to be our guidelines. So under the proposed standards, there are 120 case credits. Case credits are not cases, and I'll talk about that here. Each case type is weighted, and they're divided into misdemeanor high and misdemeanor low. And just to stop for a clarifying moment here, I'm only talking about the misdemeanor case standards. There are also felony case standards that will apply to the counties, and they will have to deal with this issue at the felony level. But for us, we only deal with misdemeanors in our court, misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors. At the misdemeanor level, it's 120 case credits. Misdemeanor high cases are those essentially gross misdemeanors, drug offenses, sex offenses, domestic violence, and DUIs for the most part. Those are credited at 1.5 credits, case credits each. That means that an attorney handling just these misdemeanor high cases would only be able to handle 80 cases in a year. Misdemeanor low cases are weighted at 1 credit, and what this means, I guess the most favorable interpretation, if you're looking at an attorney that's handling a mix of these types of cases, a public defender going forward under these case standards will only be able to handle at most 100 cases per year.
Excuse me, and currently that number is at 400?
400.
Okay, thank you.
And non-weighted. It's 400 gross or, right. So there are also additional changes that go above and beyond the changes to the case caps. There's changes in how public defenders are paid. The one requirement is that they will be required to pay them or contract with them on par so that they receive on par with any prosecutors that we hire. That's regardless of relative caseloads. And I will talk about relative caseloads in a moment to highlight this issue and why this might be an issue. There are other requirements that we have fresh standards on hiring support staff for public defenders, paying for and support staff for public defenders. There are new compensation requirements for all expert witnesses, mitigation specialists, interpreters, and in fact there's a requirement that we, along with specific numbers, that we pay for investigative services for public defenders. There is some requirement already, and I don't want to overstate this, there's some requirement already that we, for public defense cases, provide support, interpreters and various support. But these standards go above and beyond that, and get us into a new set of standards, and I'll highlight that in just a moment. What this means is that all jurisdictions in the state of Washington will need to add additional indigent defense attorneys. I am not aware of a single jurisdiction in the state that comes close to meeting these standards currently. We have 21 jurisdictions in the state, in the Pierce County, that will need to add defense services of some sort. To put this in perspective, there are just over 34,000 attorneys licensed in the state of Washington. There are approximately 4,000 attorneys in the state of Washington that have identified themselves with the WSBA as practicing criminal law. With around 281 municipalities and 39 counties, it's a pretty good bet that there are not enough attorneys to meet this demand. Not even close.
Just let me interrupt you. For clarity, the guidelines, so I'm certain here, you said that they will go into effect. They've already adopted this. The Supreme Court is the one that ultimately has to adopt these, correct?
No. As it currently stands, there are two levels of adoption of this. The WSBA has already adopted and approved these standards. Because of the RCW, they are our guidelines starting July of 2025. They are the guidelines by state law that we are supposed to follow for indigent defense services. As we sit here right now, unless there's a change, these will be our guidelines regardless of what the Supreme Court does. And I'm going to propose some action for the city when we get to the end of this, but that's what we're dealing with.
So you could conceivably change the RCW itself.
And I will make a recommendation that we do something in that regard at the end of this presentation, but you're on the right track.
Okay, then what does the Supreme Court have to say in?
The Supreme Court will adopt these, are being asked to adopt these as court rules, and that's what they are considering at this point. If they adopt them as court rules, they will become mandatory for all attorneys and judges in the state, as well as being guidelines to the city for the adoption of standards. And I'll expand on that towards the end of my presentation.
So again, just for clarity's sake here, so if the WSBA adopts them, but then the Supreme Court doesn't adopt them as court rules, what happens then?
You'll have a decision on level of liability that this city wants to take on in how we prosecute and provide public defense services. And it will become more clear as I go through my presentation on what I mean by that. But you're right. You're jumping to the end quite astutely there. And I won't hammer on this too hard, but if adopted, these standards are going to severely stress our legal system and every legal system in every city and county in the state. It'll make it, and I don't say this lightly, it will make it impossible to prosecute all cases, and certainly it may even be as many as 90% of our cases that we would not be able to prosecute. Cities and counties simply will not be able to hire enough defense attorneys to do this work. Even if you have unlimited resources, even if you said go out and hire whoever you can hire, I suppose if we were the only city to do that, we might get there. But in this age right now, we already have a shortness of public defenders. We already are struggling to hire prosecutors. The political atmosphere is such, or I don't want to say political atmosphere, the atmosphere in our law schools is such that quite frankly, we don't have young lawyers that want to go into the field. So we're fighting that headwind, and this is going to have a significant impact on our ability to prosecute and to provide public safety.
Councilmember Johnson.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I just want to queue up and wait till Joe finishes it, but I do want to get queued up and comment at the end of his presentation. Thank you.
Certainly. Can I just back up a little bit? Again, this is just so that I understand this. The Mount Vernon case that you mentioned, I believe it was Mount Vernon, that was a case where they brought, under the current statute, or whether it was a constitutional issue, I can't remember.
It was constitutional.
Constitutional issue. They brought that forward, and they were able to seek damages and corrective action. And so that remedy is always available to anyone who feels, or any organization that feels that someone isn't getting adequate defense. That in and of itself, is that being used as justification? That one case where there is a remedy is being used as justification by the Washington State Bar Association?
No, I don't think so. I think they're far past that. I think there are several reasons stated, and I think they come for most people from a good place, but a place where they don't understand actually how our system works, at least in the misdemeanor courts. So I think there's a lot of good motives involved. Quite frankly, there are a few people who see this as a way to decriminalize.
Exactly.
And that is not the majority of people. I'm not tarring everybody with that brush, but there are some who see this as a way to decriminalize matters. And I think the rest of it I chalk up to people who don't understand what we're doing and what we're dealing with.
Councilmember Johnson, do you want to wait? Oh, he's just queued up. Please proceed.
Yeah, I'm queued up until
I'm
he's
sorry.
finished, then I'll speak. Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to highlight this a little bit further, in Puyallup we have 3 prosecutors who are responsible currently for approximately 3,000 open cases. And I will fully admit that we are one of the busier prosecution offices in the state. But still, if you compare, let's say prosecutors handle somewhere between, in most jurisdictions, somewhere between 500 and you say we're at the upper end, 3,000 open cases at a time. You compare that with a public defender handling 100 cases. Clearly something's not comparable there. And it's impractical to say that, and absurd really, to say that somehow a public defender couldn't handle more than 100 cases a year. The proposed standards also fail to consider the experience level of public defenders. In Puyallup, we have 3 firms where the primary attorney has over 10 years of experience, and in one case over 25 years of experience. And one note that's not on my slide that really kind of sort of gets me is that there's an ethical issue here. We believe in the prosecutor's office, in the city attorney's office, and I have to believe in for the public defenders and for the court, that we are providing adequate public defense for our defendants in Puyallup. We believe that our public defenders are doing a good job. We do not have cases where ineffective assistance of counsel is overturning cases. This is not happening in our court. It is an ethical issue for us. We could lose our license. We have a duty as prosecutors to do justice, and we take that very seriously. And so this idea that somehow we're allowing this injustice to occur is, and I apologize for being up on my soapbox about this, but I find it offensive, honestly. We believe strongly that the current standards meet or exceed the constitutional requirements and provide adequate constitutional protection for the defendants in our city. So I want to talk how this specifically will hit the city of Puyallup. We have a projected 1,500 public defender cases this year. That's where the numbers say we're going to be at the end of this year. With 1,500 public defense cases, we would be required to have had this year 15 plus public defenders. And I say plus not lightly because it really is plus, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But in addition to the public defenders, the attorneys that we would have to cover these cases, the increased requirement to fund support staff becomes a little absurd in that we would be required to have funded at least 5 investigators, 5 social workers / mitigation specialists, and I apologize, I'm not exactly sure what that is, and 4 paralegals. These are hard numbers under the standards. That's in addition to 15 plus public defenders. I want to give you a visual look at what this looks like for us. By the end of this year, we will have around 300 DUIs or impaired driving cases that require the appointment of a public defender in Puyallup. With 3 public defenders and that type of case, they can handle 240 of those. So if these standards had been in place this year, we would have been out of balance with those standards by over 12 public defenders. And we would have had to have made a decision on whether to hire more public defenders, whether to prosecute or dismiss cases, things of that nature. We would have had some very hard decisions to make. And I am getting very close to the end here, and I apologize for taking so long. So I said 15 plus public defenders, and this is where we get into unknown, the plus part of this. There are additional things that we need public defenders for. We need to appoint them to be standby counsel. We need to appoint them for probation cases. We need to have them on hand for our community court, which is very, very important. It's a very important program that we run. All of that would requires whoever is assigned to that, to those additional assignments, to credit against their total case credit. So if they have 120 case credits, they would need, we would have to assign them some weight for these types of duties. I can't estimate that. I can't calculate that at this point. But it is certainly 15 plus public defenders that we would need. Now I'm going to show you one more chart before I bring this home for you. This is a per 10,000 population with regard to the number of cases per 10,000, total cases per 10,000, and DUI per 10,000 of population across 16 cities from 32,000 in population to 230,000 in population. And the reason I'm showing you this, and the public defender and prosecutor numbers there at the very, very short bars that are hard to see, those are the actual public defenders and prosecutors that we have, that each of these entities have. You can see that in most cities it's a 1-to-1 ratio between prosecutors and public defenders at this point. Now remember, prosecutors handle far more cases than public defenders, because prosecutors handle all cases while public defenders only handle those that are assigned to public defense. But what you see is how important this issue is for the city of Puyallup. It may be more important for the city of Puyallup than for any other jurisdiction in the state, because we have a very strong public safety ethic in our city. We do a very good job of providing for public safety, responding to calls, and doing the work that the police do and our prosecutors do and our court does. This shows you that we will have to run the hardest to meet these standards, and that's the purpose of this slide that's before you today. So just to recap real quickly, 2 issues. We have the WSBA has already adopted these standards. They will be our guidelines unless we have a legislative fix in July of 2025. We also are in the process of making of the comment period for the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court adopts these court rules, these as court rules, we as attorneys, prosecutors, public defenders, and judges will have no choice. Currently, under the WSBA standards, the council gets to choose how much liability you want to take on. And to your question earlier, Mayor, you can decide how much public defense you're going to fund. You can decide how much risk you would like to take, and you can pick that. And under the WSBA standards, we can go forward and prosecute those cases, no problem. And if we get a bad decision, from a court, then we pay the piper. That's a liability issue. But with these court rules, once they go into place, we as attorneys will not be able to ignore them. I will simply not be able to prosecute cases when there's not a public defender to assign, because my license literally would be in jeopardy. I could, and my prosecutors could be sanctioned if they blatantly violate court rules, and sanction can result ultimately in loss of license. So it's a really big issue for those reasons. So what we're asking tonight, and what I'm suggesting tonight, is that you approve city staff, myself, and the city manager to sign the comment letter that is in your packet tonight and submit that to the Supreme Court, that you approve us to make comment with the under the city manager's direction, both to the Supreme Court and to the legislature if we get an opportunity, because I truly believe that we need a legislative fix with regard to the RCW and the WSBA standards applicability, and also with regard to we need the Supreme Court to delay implementing these or these as court rules, or take some other fix with regard to these court rules. So the motion that I'm asking from you tonight is approve the city staff to provide comment in line with the comment letter that's before you, and approve us to sign the comment letter and submit that to the Supreme Court. I would also suggest that I have seen some of the other cities, at least one other city, where not just their city attorney and their city manager, but their mayor and their council members, their judge, their public defense firms have all signed the comment letter. And I would suggest that it would be a good idea to have as many signatures as possible on that comment letter. But at a minimum, we need authority to submit that comment letter on the city's behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Joe, how many years have you been with the city now, approximately? 8 years. Mm-hmm. I've known you for 8 years. I've been here about 8 years, too. And I've never seen you this fired up. Never.
You got a PowerPoint from me. That tells you something.
And I guess I find it quite refreshing. Sometimes I wonder, when is Joe going to get fired up? Because we've been fired up. And not that you don't get fired up. We just maybe haven't seen it. I appreciate seeing it tonight. And why? Well, I think it represents, at least speaking for myself, some things that I really disagree with. It's being imposed upon our city. Most recently, some of the mandates that took place in the legislature. You heard some of our concerns about that and our detesting of that. And so I appreciate that you can empathize with our fire. I certainly empathize with your fire and want to join your fire there to help burn some things away that need to make it right. So a couple of questions I want to ask is, one of the first things I said and went over to the city manager and asked him to make sure I was understanding this correctly. I asked, did the legislature implement this? And he said no. So who implemented these guidelines? I want to know who they are.
The Supreme Court has what they call plenary power over these issues. And so the Supreme Court is in charge of this.
The Supreme Court initiated this proposal?
Yes. Now, where the legislature is involved is in adopting the RCW that sets these as guidelines. So but that's been around for some time now. But that's where a legislative fix would come in to at least relieve us from these being guidelines, which provides the point of trying to get that changed is when you have a law in the books that says these are guidelines that you must follow and you get sued, that's evidence piece number one. When you're being sued, you are not following state law guidelines. And so that would be the reason for changing those guidelines.
But are these new guidelines?
Not, I don't know how old they are, but they've been around for a while now.
So these guidelines have been around, but now the Supreme Court is implementing them? Is that what you're saying? I want to know where it went from 400 to 200. Who made that change?
So
that's what I'm trying to talk about. Who made the 400 to 200?
So the 400 was the Supreme Court adopted those as court rules.
Got that. Where did it come from 200 in using round numbers where we have to have a lower case limit? Who initiated the lower case limit?
The Supreme Court requested the Washington State Bar Association to review this issue and come up with new standards for them to consider.
And is the WSBA composed of? Who makes that up? Is that legislative appointments, a political appointment, peers? Tell me who makes up that board of authority. They're not elected, are they?
They're attorneys.
They're attorneys.
They're attorneys in the state, licensed in the state. Theoretically, we all as attorneys, have the opportunity to serve on that board. Practically speaking, it's controlled by people who have time to run for boards and be part of the WSBA.
Seems like attorneys should have gotten involved with this early on to prevent that.
I will let you know that I did not pick up on the fact that these were even being considered by the WSBA.
Until after the fact, yeah, okay. So here's where I'm concerned about. I'm absolutely opposed to any group of private individuals dictating how a state should run their programs. So I respect the WSBA, no disrespect to them, but I disrespect the fact that they're trying to impose regulations on a statewide mandate, and the Supreme Court, God bless them, seems to have adopted. Maybe they have reason, maybe they're mistaken, I don't know, but I don't like the idea. I think something of this importance should come from elected folks that the people elect to office to make these kind of changes that affect the whole state, and it shouldn't be a group of private individuals who in their professional background may have good reasons, but they have no accountability to the people. So I'm very concerned about that scenario of how this came about. And I also am concerned about what is the intent behind this. I'm not going to try to accuse intent, but it makes me, I think perhaps as Mayor Castema has said over the years, good intents but unintended consequences, right? So I'm really concerned maybe their intents are very high aspirations, but the reality of what that might plan out in implementation or the lack thereof really has unintended consequences that could be devastating to our city and perhaps other cities. I have to wonder, you slipped, and I don't know if it was a slip or if maybe underlying there, it makes me wonder if there's some political things going on here that is causing this. I don't know. I am an elected official, so I can talk politics. I shouldn't be afraid of that. So I will speak that. I don't know if there's any political background behind this, but it makes me wonder, is there maybe a move to make this so difficult that it would force or compel people to drop cases? And when I saw this graph, this graph is pretty amazing. Look at the city of Puyallup and what we have done in terms of really upholding law enforcement in our city. That's pretty impressive. I asked for a copy of that. That's very impressive for per 10,000 population. We're prosecuting a lot of cases here. There's no nonsense here in Puyallup. So anyway, I'm very bothered by this. And from a political individual, I certainly would support a reconsideration and a contest to this based off of reasons of what I would say are public safety risks to our constituents that we are elected and charged to protect. So I'm coming from a political standpoint that this could theoretically and probably likely lower public safety standards, therefore make our citizens and our businesses subjective to more problems and more crime. Therefore, we have an obligation, ours is a political and ethical obligation to say, hey, this is not going to work. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the city manager, city staff, and whoever decides in terms of the council to sign a letter of petition to submit to the Supreme Court to ask them to address this, knowing the perhaps negative implications that this could have on the public safety of our citizens, and have them take a look at this. So,
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Besides the WSBA, were there, to your knowledge, was there any other offices or entities involved with this decision other than the state Supreme Court?
No, I don't. There's no other entities involved.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion. Councilmember Winning.
You know, it sounds like we've kind of delegated responsibility for this to the WSBA via our legislative code. And we've got our legislative lobbyists here tonight. I think that's something that we ought to unhook, you know, the idea that we're going to give responsibility for what is legislative action to some unelected board just seems crazy. You know, I don't think we want to empower people with no responsibility or recourse to be shaping our legal system. So I think that we ought to be taking a two-pronged approach to this, and I certainly support the letter that you've put forward, but I think we ought to be addressing this through the legislature as well. Thank you.
Okay. So there's been a motion that we sign on. Joe, you did ask that you would get further signatures. I think you're just going to have to take that up with the individual entities. But I will certainly sign that document. And if a member would not like to sign that, just make that known afterwards. We can pass it, but then make Joe know that your name, you do not wish to have it on there. But otherwise, you know, I would certainly think that most of us want to sign, but I don't want to speak for members. But with that, if there's no further discussion, I could go off on this bill, but I think that I really, it's, you know, we dealt with the Blake decision, which was trying to remedy a court decision that made it very difficult for us to enforce drug crimes. We dealt with the police pursuit law, which we had to deal with that, the ramifications of that, the juvenile justice dealing with young offenders and how we police interact with them. All of these things have caused local jurisdictions to be in a reactive format. And it's like nobody's listening. And I think also what is a theme that I see is that wealthy communities can handle this. You know, Puyallup is a fairly modest community. We are very modest people here. We prioritize public safety. We put money into public safety, but we're not rich, okay? We're not rich like many communities out there, which will have no problem getting all the defense attorneys, and many of them don't have the level of crime because they have no social services. They've got, you know, they do whatever they can to insulate and write laws that other people have to obey. It makes them look virtuous, whatever the case may be, that they allow these things, but it just doesn't happen in their community. So they get a pass, and that really upsets me. And this is a clear case where moderate income, lower income communities were going to really suffer. And those people who really care about crime in those areas, we are just going to be made to pay a very steep price from people who are really disconnected from the reality of their decisions. And I believe that to be the case. I'll gladly sign the document and make those views known in other venues too. Councilmember Johnson, do you want to add comment?
I do. You know, Mayor Castema, I really like it when you go off the rails a little bit and have that fight in your spirit and make that known. Even though many of us know your convictions, it's good. Sometimes it's kind of like it's like a hammer, and you continue to hit that until it breaks and we get a breakthrough. So I really appreciate you, and I think anytime you get a chance, you should take liberty to do it because it's important to get the public message out there, and at some point it begins to get breakthroughs, and certainly our city deserves breakthroughs for our well-being. I would like to publicly go on the record and petition our legislators, our governor, our Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, and both of our parties, Republican and Democrat legislators and senators, to please take a look at this, know the impact of how this could negatively affect good, well-meaning people in your cities across our state, and step in and fix this. And we're looking to you, we're counting on you, and we want to do all we can to support you as you bring this legislative fix to this. So my petition is to them, getting the word out as a call to action. Thank you.
Joe, just so I understand, this letter is asking for the legislative fix, not necessarily to the Supreme Court. Am I correct? Or
no, the letter's to the Supreme Court because we're in the comment period for the Supreme Court decision.
Okay. And then I guess where's part 2 dealing with the legislative?
I think that's in the hands of the city manager and our
next agenda
lobbyists.
item. Okay, that's fine. I see that. Okay, there is a motion before us. It's been seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Okay, with that, now that we're all fired up, Steve, you got to somehow calm us down.
Oh, that's a tall order.
Okay.
You can hold off on the PowerPoint, Nathan. Thank you.
By the way, just so that the public knows that this is a briefing on upcoming Washington State legislative session, which begins in January, and the city's potential legislative policy agenda and state budget requests. And the city, wisely so, we do hire lobbyists to look into our interest in Olympia. We're considering even doing that on a federal level, which I think will also prove fruitful for the people of Puyallup. I really believe that. But so that's what we're going to hear today, is a lot of that liaison. Steve Kirkley, of course, is our city manager.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Very good introduction. And so the first part of this presentation will be from Luke Esser and Jim Hedrick, who are our state lobbyists, our consultants. So they will go over some issues that they see coming in the legislature, including the budget. I'd emailed you out the memo that Luke and Jim had prepared earlier, and so they'll go over that. And then if you have any questions regarding the upcoming session and any issues that they bring up, feel free to ask them. And then I will come back up and go over the capital budget request and then try to summarize perhaps some of the agenda items that we want to bring forward to our legislative delegation. The hope here, typically we do this in November, but we start a little early so that hopefully we can come back to you with a final legislative agenda and then have a breakfast or dinner with our legislative delegation sometime in late November before everyone goes into a holiday break. So with that, I'll introduce Luke Esser and Jim Hedrick.
Thank you.
Mayor, council members, Luke Esser, part of your state lobbying team with Jim Hedrick, and we had a presentation, right? We're ready to discuss a whole bunch of topics, but if you want to just jump right into indigent defense, I wanted to leave that up to you, Mayor.
No, I think if you have put together a presentation, why don't you just go?
Okay.
And when we get to a point, if you don't mind, I would ask members if you can hold off, but if you have a question it's really relevant to a point, I'll go ahead and be aware that you may be interrupted, but if we can wait, that would be best, but I'm not going to hold you to that. Go ahead.
You bet. Well, just a broad brush overview at the very beginning. We're coming up on what's called a long session of the legislature, 105 days. Biennial budgets for the 3 state budgets, capital, operating, and transportation, will be adopted. It's also it's 105 days versus the short session, 60 days in even-numbered years, so there will be more time and more bills considered. So it's frequently the case that larger policy initiatives are considered in the long session in addition to the adoption of the biennial budgets by the legislature. We will have a new governor and a new attorney general. Voters will tell us in a couple of weeks what the makeup of the legislature will be, and we're a little over 2 months away from the start of the 2025 session of the legislature. Recent revenue forecasts have shown that There will be budgetary challenges for the state, as there are for most local governments. The leadership in the House and Senate has been talking about up to a $10 billion deficit over 4 years. The state has to adopt budgets that balance over a 4-year period, not just over a 2-year period. And revenues have been relatively flat, while expected expenditures have not been relatively flat. And so that's where that dichotomy is coming from. Jim and I will break up following that brief overview, a few issue areas. I'll start with housing and homelessness. And I was online waiting for questions last week when we had the study session on the missing middle and several other housing-related issues last week. And that's legislation that was adopted in 2023. But it was just kind of good to bear in mind, because there are some in the legislature who think that more similar action is needed. And that comes from a place where there's a feeling that cities have not done enough to provide housing throughout the state of Washington, and so that's where the missing middle, or mandatory multiplexes, as I sometimes refer to it, House Bill 1110, and the accessory dwelling unit, House Bill 1337 bills came from in 2023. A couple items in particular we wanted to let you know that we've picked up on is that there's continuing efforts to reduce the ability of the cities to require parking for housing development, and that was included to a certain extent in House Bill 1110, but there are some, and the Sightline Institute is an organization, an urbanist progressive organization that is really pushing the legislature to eliminate parking requirements, the ability of the city to provide parking. So wanted to make sure you were aware of the continuance of that issue going forward. Another item we hear about is there are some who would like to codify into state law the what's called the Boise decision, the Martin versus Boise Ninth Circuit decision, which the U.S. Supreme Court actually overturned in a case involving the city of Grants Pass. But that decision, while it was in effect, prohibited cities from enforcing anti-camping ordinances unless there was sufficient shelter space for the residents who were camping to go to. And the U.S. Supreme Court has overturned that as a matter of federal law, but there are folks in our state who are going to be advocating for that to be codified into the RCW so that it would once again be binding in the state of Washington, and wanted to make sure that the city was aware of that. There certainly will be efforts to provide more state support for various housing programs. The need for affordable housing is present everywhere in the state, rural, suburban, and urban, so that will no doubt continue. So there'll be other efforts as well, but housing and homelessness will definitely remain a top-tier item among the legislature. I'll touch base on infrastructure as well, which is always a priority for the AWC, and it has been quite a while since we've had a statewide new revenue transportation package in the traditional sense, which usually involves a gas tax increase. We did have a few years ago a transportation package that was mostly funded through the Climate Commitment Act, and thus was limited in what it could be used for. It could not be used for roads and highways generally, but needed to be used for projects that involve transit and active transportation, bicycle, pedestrian, electric ferries, items that would not produce more carbon. So there's always a prospect of a new revenue transportation budget, and so we always encourage our city clients to have their project lists ready and be ready for that next ask. And it might be for the city of Puyallup that protecting gateway project funding is the top priority, but there may be something in addition to that. And I bring the gateway project up because we've spent considerable time trying to protect the project, especially the Meridian interchange that's going to be part of that. And we've successfully last year, or I should say last session, fought off efforts to increase tolling along the whole gateway project corridor to pay for cost increases, and construction costs are continuing to raise, and so that will continue to be an issue. So we will continue to monitor that on your behalf and keep an eye on that going forward. Mr. Mayor.
On that, the Gateway project, that is, it's supposed to be completed in 2029, okay? And that would have been on the 15-year transportation budget, that would have been near the front for any adjustments. I would think that something that close up on the schedule would not be so easily kicked back. Is that still a possibility then?
I think it's less likely it'll be kicked back than that there'll be these continuing efforts to add $160 million in tolls, which is what the Senate Transportation Committee and the Senate as a whole proposed in this past session. Fortunately, the House did not concur with that, and that did not move forward. But a recent update from WashDOT shows that is still perceived as a place to go, and that WashDOT communication indicated there is currently a $155 million deficit in the Gateway project budget.
So my understanding that was going to be $2 each way. Does that amount sound familiar?
I forget how it broke down. I'm only familiar with the aggregate amounts of tolling dollars.
Understand. Thank you.
You bet. The next item on my list that I was going to bring up was indigent defense, and obviously you got a very thorough presentation by City Attorney Beck. What we focus on obviously is lobbying the legislature, so we're happy to engage further on that. One aspect I wanted to bring up that is in addition to some of the comments that the city attorney made, a lot of city and county folks are talking more and more these days about how the state of Washington, how little resources it devotes to indigent defense. And if you look around the state and categorized states by do they provide most or all of the indigent defense funding, or a lot of it, or almost none, or none, the state of Washington is way down the list. There's approximately a dozen states or so that provide little or no state funding for indigent defense and require their locals to do it, and that is where the state of Washington falls. So there's a lot of talk about asking the state to step up and help to solve whether or not there's these new increased expenditures that the city attorney talked about, for the state to step up and provide a meaningful, at the very least, percentage of funding for indigent defense. So that's been a large topic of conversation. And one thing I will add, my understanding of where these new proposed standards have come from is from a study that was conducted elsewhere in the United States about what an appropriate standard caseload is for indigent public defenders. And many have suggested that we should have a thorough study in our state of what that a number should truly be. So that's another topic that's been kicked around in the indigent defense discussions that we've been part of so far. And the next few items are on Jim's list, and I'll be happy to either answer any questions on my items, or if you want to come back and ask questions at the very end, however you prefer to proceed, Mr. Mayor.
Jim's fine.
Okay,
unless there's questions. Oh, wait a second.
Yep.
Councilmember Johnson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As long as Luke's up there, did you mention as a legislative awareness or any kind of action for us to weigh in on what Puyallup's view might be on this Boise situation and the possible codification by the state? Are you looking for direction on how we might feel on that, or you just bring it to our attention?
Wanted to bring it to your attention, at the very least to have it on your radar screen, mm-hmm. And you can certainly, cities can certainly include items that they oppose as well as items they support on their issues of importance / legislative agendas.
Well,
so
I'd like to speak to that. We had this case, this U.S. Supreme Court ruled that away, and I certainly wouldn't want to see a state overruling the federal court on that to impose undue hardship on cities who are trying to, again, protect their residents, their public ways and parks, things like this. So I certainly, speaking for myself, I don't know if any other council members would want us to be watching that and perhaps lobbying against that. I think when this was going down here in Puyallup and this Boise thing came up, we were kind of scrambling, and if I recall right, there was some group called Perkins Coy or something like that. Is that what those cats are up there?
That's a law firm. Perkins
yeah,
Coy,
right.
Just the largest regional law firm.
Yeah, and I say that kind of sarcastically, but they were kind of using that Boise thing kind of hanging over our heads. And so we seem to be the subject of implementation on how to apply that in the city of Puyallup. So I don't really have a good feeling about that particular law and the impact, negative impact I believe that it had upon our city. So to be freed from that sounds very liberating, to where we can make common sense decision on, what our public right of way should be in our parks and all these things. So I can't speak for my council, but I would certainly like to publicly state that I would be against any codification on a state level to implement that in the Washington state. In terms of the this Supreme Court deal, I think someone mentioned two-prong approach. I think we should sign this letter, petition the Supreme Court to reconsider and take a look at that. I would like to see some legislative lobbyists reaching out to our legislators and saying, hey, please, can you get a two-prong about, let's get a legislative fix on this while the Supreme Court's doing it, and perhaps between the two of them, we're going to arrive at a good place. Let's not wait on the Supreme Court. Let's pursue that, but let's not assume the Supreme Court's going to get it right. Let's go ahead and get our legislative body in action. So I think we should be proposing a two-prong approach on that. Those are the two things I wanted to speak to, what you shared, Luke. I hope that gives you at least 1 out of 7 sense of direction on what perhaps the council may wish to move on those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, City Manager Kirkley, just how we deal with this issue, I am assuming this is so that we come forward with a proposed legislative agenda that represents the council's wishes, but are you expecting that to be formulated tonight, or would you want us to hear the issues, then go back and try and formulate a final passage, so to speak, of what those priorities are?
Yes, that's exactly what it is, because typically we just bring it in November. Here it is, and you all usually just adopt it. So that is not what we're doing. We're bringing it a little earlier. Tonight you'll hear these issues. I have some others that I'd like to bring up, and then we bring something back in November.
Got it. Okay. Councilmember Dorr.
That was exactly my point.
Okay.
It's information tonight, and we'll adopt a legislative agenda at a later point. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Jim.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, Jim Hedrick. Hopefully the uplifting part of the legislative briefing tonight. Cannot think of an issue that has the legislature's attention more than behavioral health, especially on the state level. They have had packages dealing with behavioral health for the last several years now. What they are finding is the challenges of workforce. There is less of our children's generation to take care of our generation, and I have a behavioral health client over in Clark and Spokane counties. Workforce is by far their biggest challenge, and they can spend money and try to get people to get into this line of work, but it is a challenge to do the workforce and build out. We have the diversion programs that we started for drugs a few years ago as an alternative to arrest. They're trying to build out that system statewide, and in the shuffle, locals have been forgotten. AWC is talking about a diversion of the state cannabis revenue to local jurisdictions as a sustainable resource for your co-responders for your diversion program. You might recall, the initiative was passed already 12 years ago, and there was a discussions of having a commitment to local behavioral health, and there are lump sums, but they are talking about having a more of a revenue share with cities, especially those cities that allow cannabis retailers to operate in their cities. Some cities who do not allow cannabis retailers are saying you're setting up a two-tier system, and there's already a pushback on that even within AWC. So that's been the discussion. Cannabis revenue is coming in stronger than the state has expected for a long time. However, there is a lot of reasons to believe that the state will hang on to its cannabis revenue and not want to divert it to the cities, largely just because of their own budget problems, I suspect. But local behavioral health will be at the top of the top of the list for AWC and for many cities this upcoming year. Taxes in the state economy budget. The November forecast, we just had that, put out a report on that. It is largely flat. The September forecast was a very large downturn. Largely the budget surplus that the legislature left off with in April is gone. We're pretty much at water level between spending and tax revenues, $71.5 billion to put it mildly. But there is no recession from our state economists, or economists of most stripes do not see a recession, at least in Washington state, at least not yet. Want to talk a little bit about the budget process. It's been a while since we've had a new governor, but there will be a new revenue forecast out in November. There will be a caseload forecast coming out very soon on K-12 enrollment and other entitlement programs. You'll see caseload forecasts coming out, which are expected to be up. Governor Inslee will present one last budget going out the door on or about December 20th. He will do that by law. And then we will have what we call a Book 2 budget by the new governor, probably late January. There's no legislative or no statutory requirement that they put out a new budget, but I'm sure the new governor will put out a new budget. There'll be a revenue forecast in March, and then legislative budgets come out probably in late April, and then by the grace of God, we are out of there in late April with a final budget. Have heard a lot of discussion about new revenue. Of course, sales tax on services is always right up there at the top, and B&O surcharges or increases in the state business and occupation tax, because it's very efficient. If you up the rate on the B&O tax tomorrow, there will be more money at the end of the month. So that is on the table. Also, we will know the fate of the capital gains tax by the election coming up. Wanted to talk a little bit about local tax concepts being considered. The Association of Washington Cities, you may recall, last year had proposed an increase in the property tax cap. I expect that to be back on the table, and that's from 1% up to 3% based on CPI and population growth. I expect that to be back this year. The 0.3% sales tax, and I'm sorry, on this memo it says diversion. That's incorrect, and that's on me. It is not a diversion. It is new tax. I just wanted to put this in front of you because there are several cities that are talking about a sales tax up to 0.3%. This is for criminal justice. I know that cars cost less in Puyallup, so I mean you might want to consider that as you look at that. But if the county can do the tax first by a specific date, they'll have to act to put in the sales tax. They can go up to 0.3%, or they can go to something lower, and then any city within that county can do the sales tax up to 0.3%. If it is a councilmanic vote, it must be for criminal justice. You can't supplant it for, if it's a councilmanic vote, you can't supplant it for any other reason. That will be back on the table. Something that Washington lawmakers are definitely looking for, then there's even a study that just came out this month by CDM Smith, and this is on deliveries. Somebody noticed that all these Amazon trucks are going around delivering stuff. We can get you the study if you want to take a look at it, but they modeled a fee ranging from 25 cents to 75 cents. There's also an exemption over purchases over $75, blah, blah, blah. But they are looking at that. This is mostly in the context of transportation. We're going to be looking at the initiative here in a moment, but they are looking for ways to pay for transportation projects. And this is probably what I would call your more traditional road maintenance, highway kinds of projects. Public safety. For the first time I've had this contract, I am not going to talk to you about vehicular pursuits. I have not heard any appetite for any more changes in the vehicular pursuit laws down in Olympia. I have heard discussions about providing more resources and tools for law enforcement. I do think that is going to be something that we're going to want to be out ahead on. If you've been watching the TV, you know that there's one gubernatorial candidate who is a law enforcement officer, but the other one has promised a $100 million package for law enforcement hiring. I have been in contact with that particular, the staff of that particular candidate. Another thing that they want to talk about is BLEA costs. Those are the basic law enforcement academy accounts, having the state pick up all or more of the costs for training and delivering commissioned police officers. That would be a part of that $100 million package or whatever it's going to be. That at least one of the new governor candidates is talking about. More money for just the overall criminal justice system, just the municipal criminal justice assistance account. They would be looking for more money for that, and increased programs to reduce juvenile crime. That is in juvenile behavioral health. I know that is a priority for the legislature, just not clear where the money is going to come from yet. But there's a lot of talk about juvenile behavior and increased resources for that. Luke and I put the statewide initiatives on here just because of the effect that most of them are going to have on the legislature. Going to go through them real quick. I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing about them, but there's an election just a couple of weeks away, in case you didn't know. 2066 is the one regarding the natural gas and electrification. This came out of a bill that passed the legislature a couple of years ago, primarily supported by Puget Sound Energy. Puget Sound Energy, a multiple line, if you will, utility. This would allow them to diversify or solidify or consolidate their portfolio into electrification only. So that's what this bill is about. A lot of fear that this is just a camel's nose into the tent about fear of ending natural gas, even for existing construction. So that's largely what is behind that one. But that bill did, just want to make it clear that bill that the legislature passed only applied to PSE. Other utilities around the state, Avista, if you will, opposed that legislation. That initiative, I just want to point out, if you recall, that actually was an initiative to the people. They actually went out and got signatures, the proponents. The other three that will be on the ballot were initiatives to the legislature. Originally there were 6. The legislature passed 3. Then these other 3 that I'm going to talk about are going to go to the ballot next month. Initiative 2117 has to do with Governor Inslee's hallmark accomplishment in his 3 terms, the Climate Commitment Act, or the Cap and Trade and Cap and Invest. There's other parts of the bill, but I mean that's primarily it. There have been several auctions that the state has had to allow polluters to purchase credits for the privilege to pollute. It has been highly successful, and that revenue generation has far exceeded expectations. The effect that it will have on multimodal transportation cannot be measured. That is, if the voters are going to turn it down. A lot of money goes towards multimodal transportation, also towards clean energy programs. As a matter of fact, I just heard today that the EV rebate program actually cleaned out today. There's no more money for rebates if you purchase an EV car that is allowed to get a rebate. So if it's upheld, there will be more of that. But just know that there's clearly a demand out there for EV cars and the rebates that the state of Washington has allowed. We don't know how effective CCA has been yet. The first enforcement date is November 1st, right around the corner. And we're supposed to, I'm sure you will hear the reports on if they have met their first pollution reduction target. Okay. Initiative 2124, state long-term health care insurance. The question I always get about this one, it does not eliminate the Washington Cares program. It allows an opt-out. It is not eliminating the program. There is some actuarial studies that show if you have more people opt out, what is the long-term sustainability of the program, but for a subsidy from the general fund or somewhere else. There's that to look out. But it does not eliminate the Washington Cares long-term program. It simply allows folks to opt out if they want to. Also, you might recall there was a question about folks going out of state. Folks that move out of state can still keep their benefit in the program if they paid into it. I think it's for 5 years and 500 hours or something, or 500 work hours or something to that effect. It is funded through a 0.58% premium asset that would not go away, neither would the $36,000 long-term benefit. That all stays intact regardless of what the voters do in a couple of weeks. 2109, concerning the capital gains tax, that is would eliminate the 7% state capital gains tax that was put into place on assets over $250,000. The number of taxpayers of that is roughly larger than the folks in this room, but there's a number of folks in this room. I think that there were 36 to 50 taxpayers on the first try of or the first swath of it. $500 million of that would go to the Education Legacy Trust Fund. If it's over $500 million, then it would go to school construction. And that's the capital gains tax. So that's all on education, but wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. We talked about long-term CCA. Yes, we've got it all. With that, Mr. Mayor, I could take any questions. Sure.
Will you provide an itemized list of both what you and Luke said, or maybe City Manager Kirkley? How can we get these issues? I wrote a list of them. I've got 12, but I probably missed 2 or 3. But could you give us an itemized list? I want all my members to see these, to prioritize, and then get back with you in November.
Yeah. Yes. So certainly can send you what Jim and Luke just went over.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Questions? We have no further questions. Look forward to, please, Steve, continue.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I wanted to talk to you about the capital budget request.
Oh, okay.
And then I do have a few items just to get you thinking about the legislative agenda when we come back in November for you to adopt that. So as we do each year, I come to you with a couple projects, 2, 3, maybe 4 projects that we would ask for our delegation to pursue down in Olympia. This year, as you know, I sent you the PowerPoint, there's 2 that I'm putting up for your consideration. And typically what you do is you rank them, 1, 2. That's been our practice, but you all can decide what you'd like to do this evening. But the point here is if you could give me some feedback, and then when we do come back in November for the final adoption of your agenda, this would be included in it. So the first request is something, both of these you're very familiar with, but the first one is a Meeker Festival Street. And so the request here would be $850,000. Here is what is exciting about this possibility. We, city staff has a grant proposal or a request through Puget Sound Regional Council that will go before the board in November for a vote, and we anticipate that they're going to approve $2 million towards this project. In addition, as you all know, there's a community project fund request through Congresswoman Strickland's office that is going through the appropriations process that we hope will be approved this year. That's $815,000. With the $2 million from Puget Sound Regional Council, the $815,000 from the federal request, and some LIFT grant funds, we're about $850,000 short of having this project fully funded, meaning design and construction. So if we were able to get this $850,000, we could start design and engineering next year, and then start construction in 2027. So this would get us, literally the entire project funded. And I know that often is something that when we've spoken to our delegation, they like, is to go down and make requests for projects that will get it across the finish line, so to speak. So this is one. And then the second one is 4th Street Stormwater Project, which you're familiar with from the earlier discussion. This is the map of all the different phases. And so in this one, it's a request for $750,000 that would go towards phase N1B, which is 7th Avenue Northwest to the train tracks. So with the $1.6 million that you all have, I think you approved that, yes, this evening, the 1.6 from ARPA. With this $750,000, we are also going to be pursuing some federal grants. This could be fully funded as well, and so this would be the get the project all the way up to the train tracks. If the legislature, if Commerce agrees to take the 1.1 million that Hans was talking about earlier, that's been appropriated to the project north or south of the tracks, if they agree to put that towards N1B with this funding, then that N1B will be fully funded. So this is yet another potential project, or at least a phase of it, that would be fully funded. So these are the two capital budget requests that presenting tonight. If you have others that you have in mind, again, seeking your input. And then once we're done with this, Mr. Mayor, just a few items I'd like to prompt your discussion on, or at least some general direction on a couple items policy-wise.
Okay, thank you. Just to note, this adds up to roughly $1.5 million. Were we given some guidance by our legislative delegation as far as what they thought an upward amount was, or how do we arrive at that?
Yeah, so we have in the past, so last session, if you recall, the sidewalks on 23rd, we asked for $500,000 and we got $500,000. Previous years, we've asked for anywhere from about $700,000 to $100,000 to about $1 million. We've never gotten over $1 million that I recall. It's always been kind of in that $5 to $1 million range.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you. Could we pull up the next slide on the second project, the stormwater project? So this request to Commerce, right? So is that a reappropriation? Are we just asking or saying we weren't able to spend this money yet, please allow us? I mean, I'm getting a little confused because I'm hearing two different things, so I'm just trying to understand if we're just asking for a straight reappropriation.
Yes, it would be. So the appropriation was for the portion that is south of the tracks. So this would be for a reappropriation to apply it to the 1B, that is the one north of the tracks.
Okay, and those conversations have already happened with Commerce, right? It's in there.
Those are happening right now with Commerce.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Steve, are you asking for feedback just at least verbally tonight, or you just want us to hear? 'Cause I'd like to offer feedback.
I always welcome feedback.
Yeah,
I'm not. You don't have to. We can do it in November, but
sure. I'd like to go on the record. In terms of the capital requests, I'd like to. If we have to pick one of the two, I would pick the Maker Street to fully fund that and get that going. And then, of course, my second choice would be 4th Street. I'd like to throw, kind of a why not scenario. I'd like to request both of them.
Yeah, and we have done that before. What we typically do is we present both of them or three of them, all of them to the legislature, and we rank them, and then the members decide which ones that they think that would fit best.
So are they limited to one?
I don't believe so.
So theoretically, they could get us two.
Correct.
So then I'd like to propose 1 and 2, both of them, with the priority if they only get one, do the Maker. But actually, I would propose that we get both and see if we can get approval for both. Why not? I'm game. Thank you.
I would suggest that if you could have a third, that would be fine too. I mean, there's, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would say the outside limit would be 5. But yeah, as long as you have some rationale. Again, you may find that one of the legislators really like one of our ideas so much that they push it, and the net result is we get more than we would have otherwise. So I don't think you want to go, too high, but I would say 3 would certainly be healthy. 5 would be outside the scope, or outside right at that limit. Other input, other questions? Let me ask you this, Steve. What other projects, I'm just trying to think of other projects, would you, obviously the stormwater is a priority for the city. The Meeker Festival Street is a priority. We've yet to determine the two-way concept until we get a study on that. The railroad,
Right.
Same situation. So I guess unless we can come up with other ones, we're at these two.
Yeah, previously there's been a parks one that we put in, and also the railroad quiet zone has been a discussion, obviously, that council has had. We don't have that study yet. And I'm trying, Ken, when do we anticipate the study coming back?
We're still working on moving it forward.
Okay, so we won't have that before the session.
It's a bit longer than I expected. Okay, 6 months. Well, I can tell you this, that on that particular area, that the legislators individually are very excited about that quiet zone. So sooner we get that, but that's for next session. Okay, no further questions. Gentlemen, thank you, and we will...
Can I go to one more just
itemized list? Steve,
I'm sorry. I just want to go one. I just wanted to go just a quick overview here of some potential legislative issues of importance that I just want to raise. Again, not asking you to vote on these tonight.
Okay.
But just some things to get you thinking before November. One, obviously, is the guidelines to the indigent defense. So there's kind of the two-prong there of not only the legislative fix, but then also providing some funding for indigent defense. As you saw the numbers that the city attorney presented, and as Luke mentioned, the state does not fund these for us, while many states do. The other one is just the Gateway project that obviously Luke mentioned. And then our designated crisis responder program, that's about $250,000 that we did get an AWC grant on, but it would be nice for the state to continue to fund that program. Also, there is a potential bill last session that did not make it out of committee that would have prohibited police officers from making traffic stops. We have heard, it hasn't been pre-filed, so no bill has been filed yet, but we've heard that may happen again this session. So that would be something we'd want to pay attention to. And then, of course, the last one, which we've had in the past, you all have had, but just opposing blanket mandates that diminish local zoning decisions from being made here at the local level. And as Luke had mentioned, there is talk that there may be more of that coming. So these are just kind of the broad legislative issues of importance that we can, if you have some more time to think about, then when we come back in November.
I have a question regarding the first one. Amend the law to change guidelines of providing funding for indigent defense. So that would be advocating for that, but are you saying that with the implementation, I believe it was July 1st, 2025, at least for a ramp down from the 400, are we going to be subject to that? Is that correct?
Potentially, if there's no change at the state law, then yes. And there's the two-part, as Joe, city attorney, had mentioned, there's the ethical components of it where attorneys are bound by court rules, and there's a liability component. It's a whole big mess.
So we'll save that discussion for if it happens, and level of service will be on our minds. Councilmember Whitting.
I just wanted to clarify, Jim, you mentioned that there wasn't any appetite for pursuit stuff, and I'm looking at this supposed legislation prohibiting police officers from making traffic stops. those, just a little clarification on that.
I'll answer the question this way. When the legislature changed the law, I think it was in 2021, we have come all the way back on what a police officer has to go through, the evidentiary standard, if you will, for a police pursuit. This is something that comes out of maybe the same movement where we got the change in laws on this, but this is something separate. I haven't seen any hard language on prohibiting police officers from making traffic stops. I think that this has to do more with profiling. Making a police stop before it even happens, you're in the car, then there's no crime that's been committed necessarily, or maybe that there is, but prohibiting them from doing that. But for a police pursuit, which I think most officers would think is something a little different, to actually pursue someone, the evidentiary standard is what it was in 2020.
Good.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. That I was suspicious that was the distinction, but I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, it seems to me that you're right. It's kind of a refinement, and you wonder if it's ultimately getting to the same thing. If this fails, will they say that a police officer cannot turn on the ignition in a car in other words, it just almost gets to be absurd at this point where you're just saying you can't make traffic stops. Anyway, Councilmember Dorr.
So I just want to ask the city manager, this is your slide, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Not the lobbyist slide. Okay,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
do you have something specific then to offer on that topic?
No, so are we talking on the police officers?
Yes.
Yeah, so last session there were some bills that were dropped, and so WASPIC is the Washington Association of Police Chiefs. This is something that they are watching and monitoring, and so we will be watching that as well to see what the bill language is, because there is some discussion. As Jim said, it's the profiling, but there's also other discussions, because there have been in the past where the legislature has talked about not being able to stop cars for vehicle, like DW driving with a license suspended or no valid operator's license, equipment type of stops that police officers do make. Not necessarily a pursuit, which is a little bit different. So that's the distinction that we will want to pay attention to.
Councilmember Adler.
Thank you. Just real quickly, if I could make a request that the next time there's a agenda packet with these items, if you could please kindly include the AWC, Association of Washington Cities legislative priorities, just for cross-reference and situational awareness, I would appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Steve, please continue.
That's
I
it.
keep cutting you off.
No, that's
okay, with that, gentlemen, thank you. We'll continue this conversation. Okay, with that, let's move on to the, I'll wait for Steve to run behind this wall here so he can get over there and give us his city manager's report, and then we'll go on to council reports. And by the way, there's no executive session, correct? Okay, with that, city manager's report.
Just wanted to update you on your next meeting, which is next Tuesday, October 29th, and the various items on there, but the primary ones will be, there will be a public hearing and first reading of the ordinance on the formation of a transportation benefit district. And then there will be a public hearing regarding the property tax levy, and then a public hearing on the proposed biennial budget. That's next Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday, you're off. There's no council meeting. That's election day. And then the following Tuesday after that, the 12th, will then be all the first readings of the budget ordinances. So that is for next week. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, let's go ahead and start here at the top. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No report.
Okay, Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you, no report.
Councilmember Gilliam.
I'm going to be very quick. I had the opportunity to be at the Puyallup Main Street Association board meeting, and the SIP Puyallup had a high record of new people, not necessarily Puyallup residents, but people outside Puyallup come and visit with our attractions. Meeker Days they're already planning for Meeker Days, which I think that is extraordinarily brilliant. Farmers Market was very successful, and with that, I'm going to say goodnight.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Light comments as well. Three things actually. Want to remind folks to vote. It's the political process that we have, and it's a right. It's a right to be able to vote, and so I encourage folks to vote their conscience and vote their convictions. I also invite the faith-based community to take your place in our community, which is to pray. And so I encourage you to initiate that. I don't know about some folks, but I could certainly use prayer now and then. So I appreciate that. And other than that, I want to say hi to Marla. Thank you.
Good. I see her every now and then, and she brings that up. So with that, Councilmember Whitting.
I'm going to pass.
Okay. Deputy Mayor King.
Looking forward to another year of the Puyallup and Puyallup coming up in a week or so, a little over a week on the 31st from 3 to 6. We have lots of great things happening in our business community downtown and helping all of the little ones out there. So make sure you join us downtown and throughout the city. And hello, Marla.
Okay, with that, I will be short too. Just I want to make sure council members know that in the next couple months here, they're going to be somewhat intense. We'll be dealing with the budget situation. We'll be dealing with the legislative agenda and the prospects of that, trying to plan what will come forward. We will get our first version of the comprehensive plan. I think it's going to be sometime in November. And again, that's just a draft. But we have at that point about 7 months to work on that. A little bit less than that when we deal just strictly with the zoning. And so just prepared. It's going to be a lot of work. We have staff here, though, that if you need anything, any information, please, we will make sure that you receive all the information you need to make an informed decision as you see fit. And I just want to point out that Councilmember Adler had an op-ed in the Tacoma News Tribune kind of advocating for civil behavior. Thought it was well written. So she didn't toot her horn, but I'm tooting her horn for her. So with that, is there any further comments? And if there's none, we're going to adjourn. Thank you.